Political Conservation Commission meeting for Monday, October 19th, 2020. Amy, can you read the scripture?
Yes, sorry.
It's all right.
It was the last minute. Okay. Good evening. Town of Littleton began conducting remote participation Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19th, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns relating to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by the town clerk. Those concerns were supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. Thanks, Dave. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes, which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during a public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the Zoom meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you called in by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your phone. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask that people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, the raise your hand function available on Zoom, or if you called in by phone, dial *9, which will activate your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chairperson of the raised hands, and the chairperson will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute, then state their name and address. After speaking, we request the participant return their microphone back to mute. All yours.
Okay. Approval of minutes, September 28th. Was there something you hadn't?
So, James, before we go on to that, can I give two little shout outs? The first is obviously for Amy and all her tireless efforts in helping with that huge grant for the Brown property. So kudos for her. Also for Julie, Andrew, and Kai helping the day on Sunday for helping ratify the support for Article 8, which unanimously passed as well. And also all the commissioners that have helped on so many of those committees, from the dog leash to the trees and everything. So shout outs for all of you guys that did a tremendous yeoman's work over the last many months and looks like years. So thank you. Shout out to all you guys.
Paid off, huh?
Back at you, Sarah.
It does. All right, James, it's all yours.
Approval of minutes, September 28th, 2020. Anybody, any omissions or corrections?
I just have two smaller grammatical ones that, Amy, I can send to you. They're just more typos. So perfect. I did leave the meeting early, so I don't feel like I can best validate the last two hearings. So, although I have read the notes. And
okay. Anybody else got any omissions or corrections?
I move that we accept the minutes as amended.
I have one, sorry, Sarah, I was trying to get one quick thing. Yep. I guess it was definitely just a typo, but under the library story walk, you have the dates listed as October 21 and November 1. Obviously, I think it's supposed to be October 31.
Perfect. Yep. I'm hoping they have good weather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I
wait for a second.
Yep.
Seconded.
Okay.
Can we have a roll call vote, Carl?
Thank you, Carl.
Oh, you're welcome. Carl Melberg. Yay.
Yay.
Sarah Seward.
Sarah Seward, yay.
James Pickard.
James Pickard, yay.
Julie Rupp.
Julie Rupp, yay.
Kyle Maxfield.
Kyle Maxfield, yay.
And Andrew Samarco.
Andrew Samarco, yay.
It's unanimous.
Yay.
Okay. Yay. Administrative discussion, Brown Woods. You have that on the list here?
That was mostly on there just in case we needed to do something, but you don't need to do anything. As you heard, town meeting voted, so yay. The contracts are signed. I'm sending them down to the state, and we will proceed.
Great. Great. 228 Harwood, informational discussion.
Mr. Torrielli is here. He can go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Michael Torrielli here. I live at 228 Harwood Ave with my wife, Nancy. This is a new process to me, so hopefully you can bear with me. But Amy has been very helpful in directing me as to what steps to take to begin the project that I would like to take on. So may I share my screen, Amy?
Please.
Okay, let's see if I do this.
If you can, I've started to queue mine up.
All right, can everyone see it okay?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. So again, I live at 228 Harwood Ave. The house was built in 2005, so these plans were drawn up in right around that time, 2005. So my house is right here highlighted. And originally what my wife and I would like to do, our project, is we would like more garage space. So the garage is off to the side of my house. It's a hip roof colonial with an attached garage. And right where my pointer is here, I had wanted to put a third bay onto my garage with maybe like a sunroof up on top or whatever. However, it appears that when the home was built, you'll notice that there's only 34 feet to the wetlands border. So it appears that Tim Coughlin built my house, and it appears that he got, some type of waiver or exception at that point. And the problem for me is that because the house is already that close to the wetlands, there's really nothing I can do here from what I'm told. So after speaking to Amy, what I proposed is that potentially putting a detached garage about halfway up my driveway on the side there, where you can see the wetlands kind of go off to the side. So this spot right here, I'm going to scroll down. This is just kind of a bit more of a close-up view of it. Let me see if I can go out a little bit. Might make it a little easier. Okay, so this is where we're proposing to put it. And you'll notice that my architect has me about 55 feet away at minimum from where the wetlands are. And I know that that's still within your jurisdiction. So before I went any further, that's why I wanted to come have this informal discussion before I pay any more people, engineers or architects or anything else. I just wanted to make sure that I would be able to move forward with your blessing based on where it is in relation to the wetlands.
We appreciate you coming in and having this preliminary discussion. Can you tell us a little bit about what is in that area now? Is it wooded or is it a grassed area?
Yeah, so it's a grassed area about the length of the proposed garage is about 24 by 28. So the grassed area is about 28 feet, and then it's woods. My wife and I have 3 acres on our property, so we have a ton of room, but the wetlands do encroach on that a bit. So the edge of where the garage would be over here is wooded, and I'm not sure, but this dotted line here might be the woods line, but it doesn't appear, and Amy can probably vouch for this, as she was nice enough to do a walkthrough with me, but it doesn't appear that we would have to take down much, if anything. There's one tree over there, but my architect thought he could work around it. But other than that, it would really just be trimming back, as far as I can tell.
What's your opinion, Amy?
I mean, when obviously
You've been on site?
Yes. Obviously he wanted an attached garage, but since it crosses the 50-foot no disturb zone, I assume that'd be a non-starter for you guys. And so he's got this fallback position, which is, as he said, just in lawn, may impact a couple trees. He did have someone, I forget who it is, double checking the wetland line because it is kind of old.
I have to do that, and that was kind of based on our discussion tonight. But again, I didn't want to spend any more money before, kind of having an idea of whether or not this would work because of the jurisdiction.
Anybody else got any opinion on this?
So you're at 55 feet, you said, at a bare minimum?
Yes, it looks as though, so he did two drawings, and forgive the basic drawings here, but the first one he did was 50 feet, and then the second one, he moved it a little bit. We found out that the reason why he moved it is we found out that the setback minimum is 30 feet. We had thought it might be 40 feet. When we found out it was 30 feet, he was able to kind of position it where it would be at least, again, assuming that the wetlands haven't moved, which I still have to have reflagged, but assuming they haven't moved any closer, we would be at least 55 feet as it stands for a 24 by 28 foot two-car detached garage.
Okay. And how's the slope like as you go down, like up back towards the house and over? Is it fairly level, or is it?
Yes, so it's actually, there's a so where the driveway is, it's relatively level. Off to the side, it's relatively level. As it goes into the woods, I think it dips down just a bit. However, in front of my house, on the other side of the driveway, is where my septic is over here. So that's a hill, but obviously, we wouldn't be building there. But over here is all pretty flat.
I would suggest you get the wetlands redefined just to make sure before you go any further.
I think things that come to mind are, grading if there is, as Andrew brought up, but also as you're plowing, snow storage. So you'd really want to keep that within or outside of that 50 as well. So just kind of think and visualize where your, if we get some big snowstorms, where your snow is going to go, allowing you access to your garage.
Sure. Yeah. In the past, I've blown it up into the other side of my yard, or also across the street. It's just woods, so I'm able to push it straight out of my driveway and across the street. And luckily, my neighbor is a very nice guy. You guys probably know him, John Gill.
The old Pittarino property.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess reiterate things that come to mind are, keeping the grading outside of the 50, basically planning your erosion controls to be at the 50, because otherwise you're looking more at a waiver situation, which would be, I think, tough to overcome in the situation. So those are some things I would keep in mind as you're talking with your architect, and then also just minimizing the tree impacts, like very much so minimizing the tree impacts.
Yep. I think that again, the way it was designed, it gives me a little bit of flexibility. I think that the 28 feet deep would be the maximum that I would ever need. And I could, if I needed to, I could bring that back a bit.
The only thing is you got to keep in mind you're going to have construction equipment doing, assume, a foundation and what have you underneath it. So you've got to be mindful of that. Their working distance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So is the entrance to the garage is on, if you're looking at that tab, is on the right-hand side of it?
Yes. Yeah. My driveway, you can see where it says proposed driveway. That's actually my driveway. It goes straight up and then kind of off to the right a little bit. Actually, I'm pointing at my screen, but you can't see that right here.
Yeah.
And it goes up to the right a little bit. So it would be right off of my driveway.
Yeah, we also have to think about roof drainage. Did somebody mention that already? I can't remember.
No.
No, I haven't heard anything about that yet.
That's something.
You've got some good guidance on. I think James was correct. You'd really want to see if your wetlands has moved. I think you would have some supportive ideas from the commissioners here tonight, but it really is imperative to make sure the wetlands is still in the same place, and that everything is going to stay well outside of that 50. You've got an extra 5 feet to play with, obviously.
Yep. Okay, so my next step would be to have them reflagged, and then as long as I can make sure that I'm no further than I'm no closer than 50 feet, then I'll be pretty much okay.
Try and make it a little more than 50 feet, so you got a little latitude there.
Sure. Yep.
Great. Yeah, like the erosion controls are at 50 feet. You can't, like, it's not physically possible to put, for example, the wall of the garage at 50 feet because your erosion would be farther.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
you're welcome to come back with additional questions, and Amy's happy to help you as well.
And when it really gets serious, maybe you should stake it out, have it staked so it's a visual thing, so some of the board members can just view it too, along with Amy.
Absolutely.
I suggest that when we get down to it.
Yeah, Amy did suggest that, and again, it's kind of, I apologize, it's kind of the cart before the horse, right? Because I got to pay a surveyor and an engineer, and I thousands of dollars into it, and if it was a non-starter, that would be a tough pill to swallow.
Yep,
so
for sure, and we appreciate you being diligent and coming in for input. So
sure,
we've got to keep going.
Okay.
All
right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
I think our first meeting is supposed to start.
Yep.
So we have to come back to those. 7:45, public hearing, notice of intent, 97 Mill Road, 35-31. Mass DEP file number 204-9XX. Sewage disposal upgrade connecting to a town water supply for an existing commercial property with portions of the work within 200 feet of the riverfront area. 100-year floodplain. What is this?
Neil?
Hi.
Yep. Is Neil speaking? Yep, go ahead.
Go
Neil.
for it.
Hi, Neil from David Ross Associates, Mr. Pickard, representing the property owners Warren's Mill Realty. And if I have the ability to share screen, I can bring up a plan to walk you through.
Is this the old sawmill?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So you all can see that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is the property that abuts 495 here to the northwest. Mill Road comes down and then makes a 90-degree turn, and that's where the sawmill, the old Parley lumber yard, was for many years. The property consists of 4.5 acres, and with the colors that we have here, the blue line down at the bottom is the edge of Beaver Brook that then goes underneath Mill Road. So it comes under 495, around our property, and then back under Mill Road. The brown shaded areas are the existing structures on the property. The solid yellow line is the 100-foot wetland buffer zone, as well as the 100-foot riverfront offset. The yellow dashed line is the 50-foot offset. The dashed red line up here is the 200-foot riverfront offset. And then the orange line is the floodplain elevation on the property. And it kind of makes a meandering path around and cuts the property in half. And then there's also an isolated wetland area associated with some of the runoff of 495. Some culverts dump out and on their property. So we also show a 50-foot offset from that and a 100-foot offset in the solid yellow. I'll zoom in a little bit closer for you. And the proposed project at this point with the notice of intent we submitted is for two main things. One, we're going to abandon the existing well on the property that's located just at the corner of this large building and tie into the town water that's available on Mill Road. So that water line will come into the property and split to two buildings because there's two buildings there now that have existing plumbing. So we want to tie both of those buildings into the town water. The dash brown line is the siltation barrier that we have proposed around the limit of work for this project. And what we're proposing is a septic tank right down offset the largest building on the property. The plumbing comes out this back corner. This black clouded area is where the existing leaching system is for this existing building. There's another black lined cloud here, which is an existing leaching system for this building here. So we're going to connect to the plumbing on the what we're calling existing building number 1, and that's going to go all downhill by gravity to the septic tank, and that's at a much lower elevation than where it sits up here. We're sitting at roughly an elevation of 218. The floodplain is 214, and down by this barn, you can see here the garage here is 214. So it's all gravity from that building number 1 to the septic tank, and we'll also come out with gravity from building number 2 out to the septic tank, and then to a 1,000 gallon pump chamber or dosing chamber. We call it a dosing chamber because the proposed leaching system that we're proposing is going to be a pressure dose system. So the force main will leave the dosing chamber and go up to these 3 yellow highlighted areas here. And you can see the location of the leaching system as I zoom in is just outside or up gradient of the 214 floodplain elevation. We chose this particular type of system. It may be very new to you. It's called a geomat system. And I can spend just a quick minute just explaining it. I know we've used Presby systems, which is what they call an alternative leaching system. This is another type of alternative leaching system approved by DEP fairly recently, and it's called a geomat. If you can picture a 1-inch thick carpet that's 39 inches wide, that the carpet is basically plastic fibers, so there's a lot of void space in that 1-inch thick 3.25 foot wide mat, and you lay it down and it's wrapped in a special fabric that wicks the water that is sent out there from the dosing chamber. So what you end up getting is you have the 39-inch wide mat, and then you have the lateral, which is going to be a 1.5 or 2-inch diameter PVC pipe with perforations, and each of these lines will get dosed evenly every time there's a cycle. So the whole area gets water rather than a D-box system, which just goes to the D-box and then gravity out of that into the leach lines. So this whole area, all 3 of those lines will get dosed with effluent equally every time. The nice advantage of this type of system is that because we're distributing the effluent so evenly throughout the whole area, we're allowed a quite a difference or benefit in the breakout grading. I know many of you have seen septic systems over the years, and the typical breakout grading from the pipe and stone system is 15 feet and 3-to-1. So you're going out laterally 15 feet and then down at a 3-to-1 slope. On this particular system, we can go out to 2 feet and a 3-to-1 slope. So you can see there's quite a savings. And the benefit on this particular site and why we chose it is because now there's just a little bit of grading in this corner inside the floodplain and then just under the floodplain here. So we're only filling approximately 8 cubic feet of floodplain for this septic system. Whereas this line with the dot, dash dot are all the way around here, this would be what would be needed for the fill and grading of a traditional system. So we're saving all of that area and all that filling of floodplain by using this alternative leaching system.
So this,
I'm sorry?
This is going in on the flat part just next to the wall that goes with that existing building?
Right, because we have, we did numerous test holes on this property. These 2 test holes in this area of testing here was our best area with these 3 deep holes and 2 perk tests. I'll back out and show you where else we tested on the property. We did more testing over in this corner, way over here. Back out, sorry, I'm not too good at this. So all these symbols are test holes that were done that were either shallow depth, most of them were shallow depth to ledge issues. So we didn't have enough soil depth to site a leaching system. So this is our best area, which then also proved to be a nice situation for getting out of the flood zone as much as possible. Now, the proposed system is based on just a repair for the existing facility or the property, which the Board of Health had determined to be a 20-employee facility previously. So we're not proposing to be any more employees at this point. So it's just a straight repair for the existing sewage disposal system. And then tying into the town water. So as you know, this site is pretty disturbed out there. So bringing in the water line as we are is this area is already somewhat disturbed from all the previous lumberyard activity. And then where we're proposing the leaching system is in a very active area previously. So there is no vegetation removal for this project. It's simply installing the tanks, the water line, and the leaching system with the least amount of impact. I did notice as I was reviewing my notice of intent that I had put a wrong number on the riverfront calculation of the property. So on the Form 3, I had put what we were disturbing for the total. It's on page 3, section 2, and then number 3, F3 on that, where it says the total riverfront area on the property. As you can see, we're a 4.5 acre property, and at least 2/3 of it is within that riverfront area. It comes out to 152,795 square feet. I had misrepresented that number and put the 5,825. That number is actually the amount we're disturbing. So we are disturbing 3.8% of the riverfront area for this project, which again is a previously disturbed site, and we're doing a septic repair for the existing facility.
I'm sorry, Neil, what was the disturbance area, 5,000 something?
5,825, which comes out to 3.8%. So, and again, we're filling very little. We're in the only place we can go based on the soil testing we did on the site and observations of ledge outcrops and so we're only disturbing this little bit of floodplain here and here for filling purposes. The tanks will not require any backfilling in the sense of raising the grade, so that's not going to change floodplain at all. So again, we're disturbing very little floodplain or filling very little floodplain. We're not for 8 cubic feet. I mean, that seems so negligible that we're not proposing to replicate that anywhere. Be kind of hard to, on such a minimal number, to do that exactly. So I guess with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you for questions.
Neil, thank you for that presentation. It sounds as though you had a lot of thought into the property. Board of Health has blessing of this and the new system with the geomat system?
They are under review right now at the same time as you. We submitted in parallel. We were trying to get an update from Jim Gariffi. I know Brian Badger was trying to reach him today, but I know the Board of Health has been extremely busy like we have been. So, and we still don't have a DEP number yet. So,
right.
I reached out to DEP today for that, but unfortunately DEP hasn't cashed the check that was submitted. So they officially can't. I traced down trying to get a copy of the canceled check, but that hasn't gone through the applicant's bank yet. So obviously Boston hasn't cashed it yet. We will know soon from the Board of Health, but we do not have an exact answer at the moment, but I'm not anticipating any issues. I know Jim is familiar with this new technology. I've done a project just a month or so ago with him on this same type of system.
Right. Well, that's good news. And I think a lot of the commissioners have been on the site through some of the site walks we've done in the last couple of years as well.
Right.
I've been on the site many times.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I thought there was a demolition of one of the buildings planned. Is that changed? And is this the only disturbance then?
Yes, right now we've gone through numerous renditions of trying to think about how to redevelop the property, but I think it's gotten quite overwhelming. And at this point, they just want to get the septic upgraded and the water line installed, and any other redevelopment of the property would have to come before you with a new notice of intent. It's going to need a septic system and water, so whatever is done out there, but we know we can't build a bigger septic system than we are, so it's going to be limited, and this is the only spot to put it. So any future redevelopment would have to work around what we're proposing tonight.
Right, and I think we all agree that anything out there is a improvement and an upgrade. Amy, without a DEP number, we would just hold this over?
Yep.
Okay.
Unless you have any questions or anything like that.
No, I think we would.
Said that the
we would also
septic
look to any comments that Jim Gareffi has as well. Kyle?
I was just clarification. You said it was limited to 20 person, the septic?
Yeah, the Title V has multiple pages of different types of what they call calculated flow for a property. Like a house, it's based on bedrooms. This particular property was based on like warehouse storage area is what it was calculated at, with 20 employees. So it comes out to be, just go to this page here. We are considered a warehouse without a cafeteria, which is based on 15 gallons per day per employee. So we're actually designing a system for just 300 gallons a day, which is smaller than or near equivalent to a 3-bedroom house. 3-bedroom house is 330 gallons. So
I guess a follow up. So based on the way that you're calculating that, is that property, it's staying labeled as this warehouse and industrial property? It's
for this particular design, yes. If anything changes in the future, they'll be limited to 300 gallons per day of usage, unless they come up with a completely different design, which I know we've gone over numerous times with the applicant, and we can't seem to make things fit. So,
how deep do you have to trench for the water line, and where are you putting that soil?
Let me go back to that other sheet for you. So typically water lines are at least 4 feet deep to get below the frost layer. So we have the siltation barrier here, which is offset approximately 10 feet or so from where we're proposing the water line. So there's plenty of open area in this middle or right along the side of the trenches in order to cast the trench material that they're excavating to install the line.
I think you're gonna find it's pretty much all gravel.
Yeah, it is sand and gravel out there. So, but again, we've given the machine operators some room, but we're trying to keep the disturbance outside the 100-foot offset.
And storage of the soil?
It's just going to be cast right next to the trench and then backfilled as soon as they can, because they can't leave trenches open overnight. So
no soil is going to be transported off-site or left at a pile. You're just going to put back the soil you have and make a mound or spread it out, or
right.
Okay.
So has this property been tested for contaminants? I'm not sure if the question's been asked in the past or not.
I do not know, Carl. A good question. I don't know that answer. I can ask the applicant before the next meeting if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd like to know. Just
okay.
Because typically, sometimes a sawmill comes with use a lot of oils and different things.
Yep.
Yeah, some sort of phase 1 assessment would have been done, I would imagine, once they.
I would have thought being a commercial property. So.
Yeah, I think we definitely did ask before, but I think it was before Neil got involved. It's my recollection, but we've definitely asked before, and I don't recall receiving an answer.
Okay, I will follow up with the applicant before the next meeting.
Thank you. And then Neil, remind me. Oh, sorry, Anna. Go ahead.
No, so going forward, Amy, we would just go ahead and continue to the next hearing date. So if they get DEP and then answer those questions as well?
Yep, November 2nd.
I mean, usually the bank requires it for transactions, so at least a commercial transaction.
If the bank is involved.
Yep. Neil can get back to us on that. So, okay.
All right. Can we move along?
All right.
Oh,
You
no other
quit your
questions?
assignment, Neil?
No,
Thank
thank
you,
you. Thank you, Neil.
I just request that we continue to the next meeting, and I appreciate your time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
And continued discussion, update, 5 Scott Road, and that one got canceled?
Yeah, they asked to be continued because the survey was not ready yet. Apparently the surveyor had some family issues and was under quarantine and couldn't get to work or something.
So we've got a couple minutes before, so we want to go back to required for a certificate of compliance, Patriot Beverage, 204-871.
Yep, I mean, if you remember, that was basically the new railroad siding, which is all in and everything's paved as it was before. So it's all stabilized.
Okay.
The as-built and all that stuff.
Have you got the paperwork off? Well, we can't sign it anyway, so.
I can send it to you later, though, if you.
Okay.
Well, Amy.
I guess we need approval.
Right. If someone wants to make a motion for that.
Guess it's up to you, Sarah.
You guys can come off mute, you know.
I'll make the motion. I just have to find the agenda for the DEP number.
204-871.
So I'll make a motion that the commission issue a certificate of compliance for DEP file number, I've already forgotten it,
204-871.
204-871.
Second.
Okay, all in favor. Carl Melberg, aye. Sarah Seward.
Sarah Seward, aye.
James Pickard.
James Pickard, aye.
Julie Rupp.
Julie Rupp, aye.
Kyle Maxfield.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Andrew Smarco.
Andrew Smarco, aye.
Unanimous.
Okay, moved and passed. All right. You want to tackle meadow mowing and hay license tonight, or are we moving on from there?
I'd keep going.
Okay. Conservation goals and priorities.
So, Amy, you were good enough to attach that for us. What I'd like to do is to kind of get through some of these other administrative ones, and hopefully, if time permits, we can come back to that, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, and it was funny when I read it, I was like, well, those aren't really goals.
Right.
It was great, but it didn't really say what we're going to do.
Right.
And we should add in some budget and whether or not you think it's worth having Conservation Trust or Land Steward come in and to say what they think should be tackled next year.
Oh, I think that's awesome. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's come back to that, James.
How about SVT Smith Zoom?
I was just going to repeat, they're having, SVT is doing their presentation tomorrow night, basically to the neighbors about what their plan is for Smith. They will certainly be in front of the Conservation Commission. So if anybody wants to listen in, obviously you're welcome. I probably will be, but I will do everything I can not to answer any questions.
Okay. How about 73 Hartwell? What's that all about?
That was, I'm going to draw a blank on his name, but
Was that Glenn Berger's?
Thank you. Yes, it was Glenn Berger's last lot. They got appealed and the order conditions was upheld. But in the meantime, Phil Peterino, who lives next door, ended up buying the property. Well, when I was out there doing the CR monitoring a couple of weeks ago, and I got those all done, he has started some work. So I've talked to him and said, you know, what are you doing? He said, so I'm going to meet him out there and find out what's going on, if what he is doing falls within the parameters of the order conditions, beside the fact that he didn't notify, and go from there.
Does he have a copy of the order of conditions, obviously, because they were on record?
Well, yeah, as I told him, it was your appeal. And I resent him all of that as well as the approved plans.
And is his in fact house and that whole slippery slope out back all stable and worked out okay?
It is. I told him the only thing on the CR side of things is there's one post he needs to put in because he wouldn't let Glenn do it. And some controls can be taken out.
Okay. Thank you for catching that.
93 Monarchy sidewalk. Is that the deck?
Yeah, that was the deck that got built in a different manner than was approved. And I'm actually gonna meet with the owner tomorrow morning, and then maybe after I talk to him, I can see if people. I assume at least some people should go out and take a look at it.
Yeah, and I think, Amy, as you expressed to me, it's not a drive-by, so it would have to be a scheduled time for the commissioners to go out there.
Yeah, I just got a peek at it from the road. I said, oops, but I haven't been back there myself, so.
Okay, so if you could share with them that we'd perhaps like to have a couple times that might be appropriate if, you know, commissioners can go.
Yeah.
Okay, other updates and administrative action, I assume.
Oh, I have not forgotten that we did have a little bit of discussion about assessing penalties. And I did talk to, or email back and forth a little bit with Rebecca Lacey at Town Council. She's going to prepare something. I told her it's not a front burner at this point. So there is stuff in the works.
I did ask Amy to follow up with 265 Foster Street. They were on our notes at the last meeting. We had done a site walk. It's a stone yard over by the train station. And so places, Sue Carter's going to present to that, but I want to make sure that that's done fairly soon so that the commissioners can get out hopefully before any snowfall.
I hope that's a long ways off. The snow.
I agree. James, I think you're good if you want to go ahead and open the next one.
Okay. Continued discussion, request for a minor modification, Wellington Circle, Tool 4-774, revised, three houses, revised, 3 house lots or something.
Yep. So Steve is on. Steve, if you want to talk about this.
Yeah, sure. Steve Marsh for Wellington Drive. What we wanted to do is come in once just to make our modifications so we didn't have to come back in 5 or 6 times or have any of the buyers of these homes come in. So what we wanted to do is just come in once, get this over with. And then I had spoke to Amy about maybe doing something with the deed and having something recorded there so we can put the buyers on notice to let them know that, you know, they're not going to be able to come in after the fact because there's going to be certain boundaries that they're not going to be able to cross. So the other thing that came up throughout this also was there was some suggestion about signs on the edges of like the 50-foot, but I would rather do maybe like I'd like to do the deed and then possibly granite bounds or something that's a little less conspicuous, just because I don't want it to be obnoxious. I know over in Boxborough, for example, we have to put signs up every 20 feet and it looks ridiculous. So I don't want to do that. I would prefer to put in bounds and then attach something to the deed, put the people on notice so that they can't come in and blame us or blame the builder later and say, oh, we never knew about this, and then put you guys, you know, in a position. So that's what I'd like to do.
We appreciate you talking about the bounds because we just finished a conversation on Glen Burger. So, but we would like to have assurances that those bounds get put in prior to sales so that those can go in ahead of time and not as an afterthought.
Absolutely. No, we would do that. I mean, we've already put in a bunch just for the road. So they look pretty good. And I think that, yeah, no, we could certainly do that as, you know, before the occupancy permit for each individual lot. But that's required.
Would those be a problem? Because they're going to look like property bounds, not no-mow area.
No, I don't think that they would be an issue. I mean, you know, there's already, I mean, the planning board, I have so many out there now on the road. It looks, you know, it looks a little crazy, but eventually they become part of the landscape. So no, I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. I can probably raise up the property boundary ones a little bit higher and maybe recess down the conservation ones. And at least it'll give you, in the event that these people that buy these homes start to do something, like if they start to build a shed without a permit or without an order of conditions, then you would have some enforcement, and then you would have something to measure it off and say, look, you can't go beyond that. You've been put on notice when you purchase the house. It's part of their deed. So that's what
those bounds be on the deeded site plan and labeled for what they are.
I think we can do that on the as-built, right? So,
yeah.
So yeah, we could do that. I'm just
So
trying to.
Just thinking through Amy's train of thought, by putting it on the as-built, we're trying to make sure that we're not losing connections here between builders. So say hypothetically, Steve, you sell to another builder. We're trying to keep that chain of custody involved. So I can kind of see where Amy's thinking. So we really want to have assurances ahead that they'll be done sooner versus later.
I'm building every single one of those. So there were only 5 there, but I'm building every house, and that's why I'm in a holding pattern until I get this resolved with Conscom.
Okay.
So the chain of custody will go from me to the buyer.
Okay.
So there's no.
And the order of conditions does require a new owner to come in front of the Conservation Commission, if there is one.
Correct.
If certificate of compliance is issued. So.
Oh, before the certificate of compliance is issued.
If there is a new owner before then the owner would need to come in.
Oh, you mean before I get my certificate of compliance? You're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm going to get.
So it's a protection for the Conscom that if you do end up selling one of them.
Correct. Yeah. No, I understand that. No, my intent is to do those all at the same time, and then get their certificate of compliance. Even before we sell them, if I can.
Okay. So I shared with Amy, I went out on the site after the rains, and it was, for the most part, I think, Steve, she shared those with you. It was stable. There was one breakout area over by the basin, and then some erosion controls need to be installed properly.
Correct. I did see those. Just one of your photos where the path is, people have been using the path, so that particular part of the silt fence does come up just because Cooper Farm's been, they walk at least up to that point at this point. So that's why.
Teach them to step over.
Yeah, that's true. I think they're elderly. My age. So 55 and over. So.
Okay. So just, I would be cautious. We've been very blessed. So we've gotten a lot of rain, but, and it was nice to see there wasn't breakout, but your head capacity was, you probably had like another 6 inches or so. So, but we'll see how that recedes for you going forward.
Yeah, it's actually gone, it's receded quite a bit since Saturday. So, and I did see that one close area where, in your photo, where the breach is. There'll be people there. There was actually people there working today. We'll recon that entire line and correct that. So,
thank you.
Great. So that's it. Other than that, again, we were trying to push the houses out of the 50 foot and a little bit closer to the street and just orient them so that the views would be better on those. So for lots.
So the car did get pulled before the horse a little bit here. So I understand the plan to change a little bit and the houses were pulled a bit further away than what was previously shown.
Yes.
So, hello, good evening. And I have the plans to present for the notice for the minor modification to the order of conditions. And so I'm just, maybe I'll help and just get this up.
Hit the shared screen thing.
Share screen, okay.
You should be able to pull that up.
Okay, there we go. So, okay, we submitted a plan today. This is not the plan we submitted. What this is a colored plan to show how the houses now have been changed from the original notice of intent. So, and 1 and 2 are out of the buffer. So really we're talking about 3, 4, and 5. The last time we came in, we were at the back end of lot 3 here, and we've pushed that one forward. Lot 5 is essentially in the same place, and lot 4 is essentially in the same place. I mean, they haven't really been moved further forward. What has changed in both 4 and 5 is they've been flopped on side. Which side is the garage? Overall, what you can see though is that all the driveways are shorter, so that kind of helps somewhat for the runoff. Otherwise, this is the best orientation from perhaps Steve's point of view, which is the face of the house is towards the road. That's not how we originally designed it. So that's how it's now been changed.
In other words, I fixed it. Right, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, you're putting it up as a marketing tool to face them to the road.
Correct. And to take advantage of the views as well. So
I was hoping it would be for solar, but of course,
and for solar.
It could be.
Actually,
there's not many trees left out there. There's plenty of solar.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about drainage, if that changes anything on 4 and 5 out there, Steve.
Well, I don't think it does change much of anything. If anything, there's less, like Ian said, with the driveway. You know,
I'm thinking more roof and hoping that we're not going to then get into decks and things like that. So more roof and how the pitch that might shed off towards the sediment or back.
Let me address that. I mean, I did check the calculations on this.
So Ian, if you can reposition your plan back the way it was, that would be great.
How do you mean?
That's better. Yep. Just keep
did I move it? Sorry.
Yep.
Well, I mean, we've kind of graded the land so that water that does run off is certainly goes away from the house, and I mean the contours are there. That's on the plan, the contour plan that I prepared. So I spent a bit of time thinking pretty carefully as to how that water does run off, because all these houses have been raised up somewhat to get them all at the same plane. So the water it's now flat. So the water has to run off. And
Ian or Steve, I think it's helpful. So some of the commissioners may not have gone out in the coming weeks to see what you've done for work. Can you explain to them what is there presently, which is what is on the plan in terms of your grading perhaps and your basin?
Okay, so what we have done so far, the road is in except for the final coat of paving. The majority of the site work, as far as disturbance for the property, which it's pretty much encompasses everything that you see here, is cleared. The septic sand is in. And we're preparing to dig cellar holes. The sediment forebay's in, all of the drainage is in, all the water lines are in. I do not have the electrical line in yet because we haven't really determined how that sidewalk / bike path is going to work. I think we figured it out. But again, I wanted to just make sure. That's one of the reasons why I kind of had to jockey lot 5 around too, because the grades fall off substantially there. So, but the place it's pretty well cleared, and we're ready to essentially just do the final grading on it and loom, with the exception of the septic system, which still needs to be plumbed, the entire project. We put the houses in and then we'll start the landscaping. But it's all landscaped up until to where the cul-de-sac is.
Okay. Thank you for that. And my last question is, have we already predetermined, or you predetermined any dewatering sites for if you do have water on, say, 5 and 4? Amy, you might recall that I know that it's wet out there, so we'd rather jump to that ahead of time versus being reactionary if we do have water now that we've had rain?
Yeah, I think that we would just, we would probably just put it into the sediment forebay, along with some hay bales. I don't know if when you were out there, Sarah, if you noticed that we had put silt socks on the pipes that fall out.
Yeah.
So
I did. The outlet was clear. The inlet within there was, that's why I was saying you didn't have a lot of space left. So the commission would have to really discuss that if they felt comfortable with putting more in there, and it would obviously have to be clean as well. So
yeah, part of our original order as well, that we have to clean that out before, on the final certificate of compliance anyway, to make sure.
I know, but you'd be adding water in there prior to it being stable. So Amy, do you have an opportunity to share screen on any of those photos?
I do not.
Okay, never mind. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sarah, I went out this past week, so I hadn't seen the project before, but I did head out there on my bike, looked around, saw the teeny tiny tree on lot 1, and then there's a pretty big stockpile of soil on lot 5.
Yep.
So I'm familiar now with the site because I did go out and check it out.
Cool. All right. Yeah, so Steve, just try and think ahead of time in terms of how much water. We've just kind of learned from Durkee that we don't want to be reactionary to water.
Oh, correct. Yeah, no, I'm aware of the Durkee situation. So I think we would be okay. And then if we were going to de-water, I'm sure we would come up with a plan. I've de-watered other projects similar to this. And, again, we'll just, I think we could utilize the sediment forebay if we have to.
Okay.
And then,
thank you.
So I think it should handle the capacity. Looks like we're going to be dry for the next week or so anyway, next 10 or 15 days. So I'm hoping to have my cellar holes in by then within the next couple of weeks, my foundations. And then once I get that grading done, the rest is landscaping.
So do we need to...
So quick question, so when we talk about like where you work that's done already, any questions on, and Julie, I think you know the area better than I, any flooding issues with neighbors or anything now that we've started to kind of elevate the site? Steve, I don't know if you're aware of any of that. I'm assuming you would be.
No, I'm sure they would call Amy first and then Amy would call me. But no, we haven't. No, we really don't have any. Everything runs down gradient to this from all my abutters, except for one maybe on Laurel Drive off in the back. But they're
is that an issue on Laurel Drive?
No, not at all. We've had no issues. We've had no issues at all. Again, with the amount that just that little breach that we've had, we've been pretty conscious of making sure. I mean, I know what happened up at Cooper, so I didn't want to have that.
And here again, this is a posted hearing, so if somebody has a concern, they can certainly join in on these meetings.
Right, and I speak to the neighbors frequently, and I know that some of them have called the town and talked to them, but nothing to do with regard to you people or the commission. So again, we're downgrading. Everybody's really actually dumping their water onto us, so including Goldsmith Street. So that's
Amy, what's next?
So I think what you'll need to do if you're amenable is approve the modification to lots 3, 4, and 5. And I think you need to establish a timeline of when things will get done. There's going to be the deed restriction and the posts, I think, are the 2 additional things.
And we're good with the whole bike path as well?
We are.
But yeah.
Okay.
What I was thinking for the deed restriction, I just today sent you some of the draft language, which we don't need to get into now, is maybe just say that this draft language needs to be agreed to before occupancy permit. I don't know if you want to really tag this.
I would say building permit. That way it just keeps everything while it's fresh in everyone's mind. It shouldn't take long. So.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. When I apply for the building permit, I'll make sure that we get a draft copy of that restriction.
Yeah,
So,
I'm going to want to run it by town council and all that. And then when would the commission want the restriction put on the lots?
Prior to sale.
Prior to sale or prior to occupancy? We don't care.
now, occupancy would be better, I think, when we go for the occupancy permit.
For some strange reason, he went and rented them.
Well, like you said, Jim, if for some strange reason, let's say that somebody didn't have a place to live and I had the occupancy permit and they moved in and they were going to close 60 days later. So we should say occupancy permit. That way we won't circumvent that.
Yeah.
And it is also easier for
you can you could split hairs and say whichever comes first.
Right. Okay. Either or.
Okay.
So we're good with that.
Okay.
And then do you care when the posts are in just before certificate of compliance?
Oh, we want they should be done early.
Yeah, we'll do those while we're doing the landscape, and we'll probably have them in before that, but we'll do them. But yeah, I would say prior to occupancy.
And just so the commission, I recommended, I think, 6 locations for those. I don't know if you guys want to review those separately or not. I was just kind of throwing darts. A couple behind lot 3 along the erosion control fence. And then pretty much the property lines of lot 4 and 5, the outer berm, so that they could, if an owner wants to, they could mow and landscape their side of the 4-bedroom, but would leave alone the outer berm, which should be mowed less frequently.
So for instance, Amy, on lot 4, how many would you put in?
There's one somewhere around the lot 3, lot 4 line before you get to the septic system. You can see where the erosion controls are. So one in there, I haven't really nailed that down. And then one probably on the property line at the sediment forebay, on top of the berm, the far berm, the outer berm. And then one between lot 4 and 5 on the outer berm, and then one on lot 5.
So are you comfortable to say that you would have a minimum of 2 and not 3 on every lot?
I haven't even really thought about it. I was just throwing stuff out. So I told Steve I was looking at maybe a half dozen. We might want to think about it a little bit.
I think now's the time to have that conversation, though, because we're approving it in essence tonight.
The weirdest one for me was at the corner of the erosion control on lot 3, because the bound is going to be where they can't mow, because they're into the 50 on that, or manage vegetation beyond that, or dump beyond that. It'll be nice to have it on the property line because it makes everybody just easier. They also know it's where their property is. And I don't want to put 2 in there. So do you see where I'm talking about?
I do. So how about a minimum of 1? So each lot would have a minimum. I'm just saying, in order to try and keep this going, you would say a minimum of 1 and not more than 3 per lot. So if Steve, you felt comfortable with that.
I think that's fine. I think that's fine. And then we can discuss the actual locations.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
Amy, you were saying the lot line on lot 4 and 5.
Well, as Steve was saying, and I didn't want to put one, smack in the middle of a lot. And these aren't all that wide, so I think one at each property line is going to, get them the idea that they shouldn't be landscaping beyond that point. It might be their property.
But isn't the wetland line further in than the lot line in both those?
Right. Ian, I don't know if you have the grading plan, but you can see the sediment forebay on there. And probably pretty much along the dotted 50-foot line is the outer berm.
I just don't have it colored, that's all. Here you can see lot 4 and 5, and then here's the sediment forebay. Here's your silt fence.
Right. So on the slope above the silt fence is where I would suggest the posts. So turn that into lawn beyond that.
Yeah,
at the top of the slope.
Exactly.
I see.
That'd be perfect.
And so the only weird spot is on lot 3 where the erosion control and the property lines all sort of close, but we can figure something out.
I kind of think you ought to have one in the middle of your property lines and maybe one in the middle, just as an eye.
Yeah, actually, I think if we put them one, the one on lot 5, then one between 4 and 5, and then just one on the back side of lot 4. And like you said, Jim, if you'd be able to stand back there and eye them up, should be able to see all 3 of them.
1, 2, 3, but
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to need to be more than that. It's not going to turn into shrubs, so you'll be able to see them.
Yeah, that sounds fine. But I think if we just go, minimum of 1, maximum of 3, but we'll start with that.
I think you want to be at the top of the bank here on lot 5 and not on the property line.
Yeah, right. You're probably right.
You're not going to see anything from there. You're going to want it at this corner.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Ian. I think in essence, for us to keep this hearing going, I think that can be fleshed out a little bit later. But Amy, are you looking for a motion?
I am. To approve the proposed minor modifications to lot 3, 4, and 5, with the conditions as discussed, unless you want me to repeat them.
Great. Is there a commissioner like to do that?
So moved.
That was simple. Now do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Now, Kyle, you got your job back again.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, job security.
Carl Melberg, aye. Sarah Seward.
Sarah Seward, aye.
James Pickard.
James Pickard, aye.
Julie Rupp.
Julie Rupp, aye.
Kyle Maxfield.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Andrew Smarco.
Andrew Smarco, aye.
Unanimous.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Continued public hearing, notice of intent, 336-338 King Street, U19-380, 38-1, and MassbU file number 204-9XX. Senior residence development with 24 residential dwellings, unit parking, and stormwater and VMP and on-site septic. Somebody gonna speak to that?
Good evening, Bruce Ringwald, GPR, representing Masco Housing. You read off the number. We do have a number now. It's 916.
Okay.
It was a month ago we met last. We had some discussions with the planning board relative to some requests, and we've made some modifications outside the buffer zone. If I may share my screen, I'll bring some of that up with you here. Wow, something happened to my screen. Can you see that all right? Because my other screen disappeared on me.
Yes. Okay,
so let me blow this up a little bit. So our existing Hager house is right here where it says CH. We had a building that attached to it that came all the way across in through this area. And we've narrowed that building down from the road's perspective and moved the units around in behind. We had a nice green common area here. That's now moved to the northeast or the right side of the building. This meant we had to modify this drive just a whisker in here to have it have adequate separation between the buildings. This is kind of the main walkway through, but it's also emergency access for the fire department and emergency services. This has been done and accepted by the planning board. The planning board closed their hearing a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So this doesn't change anything down in here for us. The buildings are still where they're at, and there's separations that we're all at here. We did in the process try to look to see if we could move anything forward, and between meeting handicap slopes and spaces for the water line and the sewer lines coming through, offsets from the fire access, there was really no space to shift anything around. But I wanted to show you this change, even though these changes were outside the buffer zone. So those were something that has changed. Jim, you'd asked me on several occasions to take a look at the retaining wall over between the town hall property and this site. Not only did I go out and look at it, I reviewed it with our land surveyor, and the wall is indeed on the town property, and there is indeed quite a big crack in it on the corner of the wall where it makes the bend behind the storage buildings that are at the back of the parking lot. Hopefully it doesn't fall over. It's going to be fun for somebody to rebuild down the road. Then we had given you a letter on mowing of the wet meadow and the trail maintenance. Amy and I have, and some plantings, and Amy and I have talked about this. What I'd like to get to you is a sort of a commitment document. The CR is in process, but it's in a very generic draft form right now. The homeowners association is being put together by the group as well. That's a much detailed thing because of being a co-housing operation versus just a standard homeowners group. And where it's going to take a little while to get those two documents in line, I'm hoping that I can provide you with a commitment letter that addresses future planting, namely in this area right in here, where the wetland line is up into the area that's mowed regularly right now, so that we can kind of control that wetland line to allow for that not being mowed. And, you know, we have that trail that comes by there that's on the grass. It's not a gravel trail or anything else. It's just where people will walk by, which is better shown. If I can change these screens without it having an impact. Did that work?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll zoom in on that just a whisker in here. Where we have this trail again, this is, as it says, existing walking path, grass walking path that comes on across through here and across the back. And Jim had asked through Amy for a plan that shows the aerial. That worked? You got that one?
Got it.
Okay, so the property lines can't line up exactly because these aerials are not done for photogrammetry purposes. They're done so everybody can see where is where. So they're not askew, or they are askew. But this property line basically goes right about through the middle of this tree hedgerow behind the church parking lot. I don't know if that answers your question, Jim, or what you were after with that.
I was kind of wondering how close the church was to the parking lot that you had proposed, that's all.
To the parking lot that we have proposed over here.
Yeah.
The church has got a good distance. The church sits here, their landscape sits. Let's see if I can zoom this in a little bit here. Gets a little dot matrixed here, but they have a septic system in the field over here. And then there's some trees along the line. And then our parking will be here with a shed, the carport along the edge here. See if I can bring that back up again without losing everything else that we got going on here. Not it, not it. This is it here. So the existing pool is right here in this location. So the existing parking is generally right in the same area as the existing pool. And then the church is actually like off the screen to the left-hand side here,
Okay.
the actual church itself.
Okay. Now you said these blocks here on the edge are carports, or
This is a car, where did my cursor go? This is a carport right across this whole edge down here. There's 2 spaces at the end that aren't in a carport, but all the rest of these are in a carport. And the one on the end is all enclosed. The architectural plans I don't have up right now. I could bring them up, but it's a salt box type roof. There's very minimal that slopes towards the front, and it all slopes towards the rear. And there's a slight retaining wall here, and then there's a drip edge that catches the runoff from that and recharges it into the ground through here.
Bruce, can I just ask a quick question on the carport? So, and as they drive in, do they have a solid back, or is there going to be snow plowing going back off where I see where you've got guardrail? Solid.
It's solid on either end and on the back.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing that's open is the front, and there's a column every 2 spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Now that's the old configuration I see.
That is the old configuration. I just was trying to bring something up quickly that showed where the carport was for Jim relative to the church. Anna, you're on mute again.
Sorry.
Initially you said you were going to move the barn or something. Is that going to be torn down or moved on the
The
property?
barn gets moved. Currently it sits right in this general location, and it's going to be relocated back here. This is the existing house in the back, so it sits behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Now the carport on that side, that's going to be the same kind of configuration, right? With the salt box roof and then.
Yeah, there's actually more spaces on this side, but yes, so it's again a salt box roof where a small portion in the front drains towards the parking area and the balance drains towards the rear. This catch basin here is kind of shifted over into here with the change for the big green that sits in here now. And we've connected a sidewalk from here to the sidewalk that goes to the front door. But again, that's all out of the buffer, but just to fill you in with what's happening back there.
Where it's elderly, are that you're going to have heated concrete, snow melt?
No, and be careful in that elderly, Sarah. You and I could have gotten in here a long time ago.
Oh, maybe you, Bruce, not I. So.
Oh, that hurts, Sarah.
No, I was just curious. You see that out in Colorado all the time where they're heating everything and even using the solar to capture and do that. But I recognize it's not cost efficient, but it saves hips in the long run.
It definitely does. And the proponents for this project have had a very nice wish list. And with every change that we've had to make for one commissioner board or another, additional costs come into play. And some of those fun things like ice melt and such like that are gone by the wayside. But we keep on looking at it. If we can bring it in, we will.
Speaking of concessions to boards, where did you land for affordability with the planning board?
We are at 40%. I think it was. I've lost it right now.
We have eight of the 24 units will be designated as affordables, and then 2 additional units will be sold at 150% AMI. So there'll be 10 units that are offered within the 60 to 150% of area median income.
Which is exactly where we had been asked to get to, and it took a bunch, but we worked it out there.
And then what did you do since the last time to look at any places to improve the impervious situation within the buffer zone?
What we did was we looked at the, again, this planting document, this commitment letter for planting and controlling areas in here. We have these sidewalks in here are just a 4-foot wide sidewalk in all these locations. They are paved. They're not impervious, but there's all pervious area in between and around them all. These are gardens. These aren't patios. These are gardens back in here behind the buildings. You know, we're taking out all the asphalt that's back here right now, which is in the buffer zone. So.
Can you remind me the percent change of impervious to the buffer zone with the project?
I cannot right off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Well, it's not a reduction, correct?
What's that?
It's not a overall reduction in impervious. It's not
an overall reduction in impervious area, but it is an overall improvement in clean water impervious area because it's all roofed area now, which is clean water, and all that water is being caught and recharged into the leaching galleys and the infiltration basin and water swell, or wet water swell. So before it's paved area that's untreated and just running off.
Okay. It'd be nice to have less impervious. It seems like the entire 50 to 100 is taken up with structures or things directly adjacent to structures or the infiltration basin.
I'm going to scan out a little bit here in this little window that I've been blowing up so that you can see what's going on. I will agree it looks that way, but remember that we have this large site that goes all the way around, and we're only working in this little tiny piece of buffer zone right in here. Nothing is happening in through any of this back in here. Nothing's happening in the other portions and over in here. Yes, there is a small area that we are making impervious area, but we're getting rid of car pavement and putting in clean roofs and recharging, which right now is just dirty water sheet flowing.
Is there still going to be that path for the public to walk through?
Yes, these bold black lines on either side, dashed lines here and here, are an easement for that to connect from Castle in the Woods over to the ball fields and the municipal properties on both sides of the project.
So where do they, at the ball field level, is that where they pick up this path?
Yeah, the path would come through here, and it would probably come up a little bit here and switch back across. There's kind of an old cart road that's in here that would come around, and it'd be on the right field, or the left field, the third base line side of the ball field.
So that'd be something that would possibly be traveled from people coming out of the library?
Could be people coming out of the library. Could be while you're got an older brother or sister playing ball and another parent or sibling taking somebody over to Castle in the Woods. Could be just moving back and forth between the two without having to go out to the road and along, King Street. So.
Okay.
Is there a bond associated with the commitment for the CR, since it sounds like we won't have the language and for the plantings?
There's not a bond. What there is set up is it's a condition on the planning board side We're working out those conditions right now, and what we want to do is mirror that condition with your order conditions for timing of all the parcel of the CR to be in place. And the commitment letter, I assume, as has happened with other projects of yours, would be incorporated into the order conditions as well.
Does the CR allow for cleaning of the maintenance of the brook?
Of the drainage ditches, yes.
So what happens if there are issues with the CR language? Like how does that work if the project's already built and we have no, there's
we're looking to have it resolved before we're in a building stage in the setups that we're putting together now. Or we'll be in the very early building stages.
So Julie, I guess what I'm hearing you think is prior to the previous applicant is to tying that into something, whether occupancy or something, but to really have that firmed up tonight, what your thoughts are. To tie the language to the CR. Or Amy.
Did you remember where we had it set up in rough form with the planning board?
I think the CR needed to be in place prior to the issuance of the final CO.
Yeah, I think it was even earlier.
Was it sooner?
I think it was sooner than that.
All right, I'll pull it up.
Yeah, I thought it was tied to building, although I thought we made some concession.
I think, Julie, you're right. We originally thought that like break ground, but then we're backed off a little bit from that to like, okay, what would be the next more lenient step for that going forward because the language isn't done.
That's what was happening in Healy.
I don't think we've had a discussion.
You can't control the state. So sometimes it's good if you can just have the CR submitted to the state by first building permit or whatever. And then the final one, the approved CR is going to be sometime further because you can't control how long the state's going to take.
Right. So what I was hearing here was that there was just a very general CR, whereas with Healy, it's more, there are more details. And so that's where my concern lies.
They would both be pretty much as detailed. Actually, this one might be more detailed than Healy Corner. Because it's got all the
okay. That's good to hear, I think, as long as we can be consistent.
Right. Yeah. So I misunderstood that. Okay.
No, that was great to bring that up. So, okay. If we can mirror the two languages with the planning board and other projects, that would be great. So, Amy, what do you need from us tonight?
I'm not sure if you're ready to close without seeing some of this commitment language for the planting and stuff.
Commission members?
I'd hope to have it to you before tonight, but when I couldn't get it out this afternoon, I wasn't going to rush it and have you not have a chance to have read it yet. So I'll have it for you as soon as I possibly can. Get on the next meeting and hopefully close at that point.
I think that would be more amenable to us to have a chance to review that and back it off one more meeting. Amy, November 3rd?
November 2nd.
2nd, sorry.
And Bruce, the trail from the town hall side of things to your property, is that going to be an easy trail to, how is that going to get built, put it that way? Is there something that has to be built there? Do you need steps or anything like that? Or is it just going to?
I think it's pretty much going to be a matter of what level somebody in the town the townspeople want it to be, the trails committee, etc. It's fairly smooth transition. It's something that, with a handsaw and some clippers, you could make the path happen right now. Then you got to get to the fence. There's a fence around the ball field. There's one opening at the backside. So there'd have to be a discussion with somebody as to where they want to have it come through, whether they want to go all the way around the back to have the opening where the opening is, or if they want to make a new opening on the right field side so that it's nice and easy to come up by where the concession stand is. 6 one, half dozen the other. But that's all easily walkable right now with a little bit of clipper work. There's a bit of bittersweet vine growing in the way there.
I'm sure there is.
Concession stand? I didn't know we had one.
What about on the other side where the castle in the clouds or castle in the...
Castle in the woods? There's going to need to be a little bit more stuff dealt with over there to look at it. As you may recall, when we did our site walk, right in this area right in here, it seems that you could skirt around a wet area that exists right here. But you know, we didn't venture over in there too far at the time when we were out there. But you know, what we've proposed to the town is to provide this access easement. I know it's something that a lot of people have been asking for in the past, and it hasn't been accessible. And our client is making it accessible to the town, but we're not generating the trail on either end of it.
So we may need a boardwalk or something on the town side, on the castle.
On the castle in the woods side, again, I have not walked it as in detail. You know, as close as I got to going over in there was when we were all standing there together.
Freezing.
This time of the year, a month from now, last year, and we said, it looks like you could go through right there, okay, and it's about as far as I got.
So that remains to be determined. Would that be the right approach?
By the town.
Yeah.
It'll be a town cost.
Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a few things for you to do, Bruce, for the next. Would you offer to ask to have it extended one more meeting?
Yes, please. If you would extend this to the November 2nd meeting, I will provide the rest of the remaining stuff for you by the end of the week. Or Monday.
End of this week or next week?
The end of this week or Monday the 26th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Are we, you need a motion or to continue us, or are we good, or?
Nope, we're good.
Somebody want to make a motion to continue this?
You don't need a motion. It's continued.
Oh, it's continued.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
You're all set, Bruce.
All right. Thank you very much. You guys have a good evening.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
Public hearing, request for amended order of conditions, Taylor. Where the heck am I here? R10-14-0, Mass DV file number 204-906. And I guess there's another part of that for a public hearing notice of intent, 153 Taylor Street, R10-14-1, Mass DV file number 204-9XX, demolition of existing office building and developer of a fleet storage parking lot. Somebody want to speak to that?
Yes, please. My name's Todd Morey. I'm with Beals Associates. This evening from our office, we have Larry Beals, Matt Costa, and myself. We also have Brian Orr, Owen Hall, and Pat Mullane from Northbridge Partners. They're the applicant. And we have Calvin Champlin, and I'm scrolling down through the side here. I think that's it from Amazon this evening. I've got a couple of housekeeping items first, and then some updates on some information I promised to come back with for this meeting. The housekeeping items, we do have a file number for the notice of intent for 153 Taylor. It's number 204-0917 now. So you should have file numbers for both the amendment at 151 Taylor as well as the new notice of intent for 153. The other item was that we didn't have completed at the last meeting was the peer review. That has been completed. We got that just prior to our initial planning board meeting. We returned those responses to the planning board and the peer review company consultant Friday of last week, I believe. Really nothing within your scope. I don't know if you've seen those or not. There was a comment about adding some additional test pits for the stormwater management facilities that we're proposing. But since the site was pretty much more or less identical at every test pit we had, we requested those be in order, a condition of approval on the planning board permits. We would request the same from you folks as well. We also received a request from Amy last week. I think this came in last week about the, there's a lot of wood guide rail on the site that we're going to be taking down. Some of it we're replacing, and some of it we just don't need to, since we're pulling back the development area so far from the wetlands and from the top of bank. We don't need to put the guide rail back up. So we talked about it throughout our team. We're going to be able to, we'll be a little bit more careful, I think, than the contractor normally would when he takes those pieces apart. And we'll work with the town to find a place to stockpile those that are not in the middle of a construction site. So if you do need those for trails or what have you, they'll be available. So
that would be great. It's great stuff for a boardwalk. So yeah,
and it's fairly robust wood, and it lasts a long time. So might as well use it if it's there. So that
always looking to scrounge. So
that's fine. We also had two items that we kind of left open that I said I'd come back with. One was the general direction of the groundwater flow. We checked in with the Littleton Water Department, and it seems to be that it flows generally from Taylor Street out towards Beaver Brook. So I'm sure that's probably not too much of a surprise to anybody that it flows from the upper elevations down towards the brook. And the other thing, we talked about some cost information that I had presented for carports and for parking decks. And I went back to our general contractor as well as some other file information that we had in other communities and things like that. And I was actually a little low on the pricing. So for example, for the carports, I had said about $20 to $25 a square foot of coverage. It actually ends up being about $28 per square foot. And then for the decked parking, I had said roughly $13,000 to $15,000 for a typical 9x18 parking space. It actually ends up being about $18,000 for a 9x18 size parking space. So those premiums would end up being an extra $5 million if we just covered the van spaces for the carport. And if we did half of the site with a deck instead of the pavement, it would be $9.6 million to do that. So that's an update on those items. I don't have a real lengthy presentation for you other than to just come up with that housekeeping. There was a question about the flood zone, and just to make sure that we comply with the requirements that are within the Wetlands Protection Act. I've got some information relative to that we can discuss, but before I go to that, I just wanted to see if there was anything else that you folks wanted to talk about this evening.
So Sarah, see, we're here. Sorry I missed you at the last meeting, but I have caught up on notes. So I am most curious on your presentation regarding floodplain and FEMA mapping as well. So hopefully we won't skirt over that. And also through all of our concerns is any type of de-icing material that's used on that, which I think we've been quite clear that that's of concern. So I defer to you on those two comments.
Sure. Well, let's start with the de-icing, because we had a bit of a conversation about that last time. And I actually did quite a bit of research just looking at several different ways that we could maybe work through that. And a lot of them kept pointing me back to Minnesota DOT, believe it or not. And the general conclusions that we kept coming back to was that you could substitute different types of chemicals in there, such as magnesium chloride, calcium chloride, and some other things, but you still end up with various water quality problems, whether it's hard water, whether it's excess magnesium, and things like that. The underlying issue seems to be that in order to get rid of the ice, you need some kind of a chemical to do it. And it's just, there don't seem to be any out there. And I told a quick story that I had found there is a substance that you can get that seems to control the ice, but unfortunately it's basically volcanic ash, and you can get it in Washington, state of Washington, and the state of Oregon. And I was speaking to the folks out of the Oregon DOT, and they take a lot of the volcanic material out by the Cascades, crush that up, put it down on their roads in the wintertime. The sun catches it, it heats up, melts the snow and ice, and then in the springtime they recycle it, restore, stockpile it. They have it available for the next year. So it's a red material. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of volcanoes in New England, so we don't have the opportunity to get something like that here. We also talked to the Littleton Water District about this problem, because they do have the monitoring wells that are just off the edge of the 151 site as well as the 153 site. They acknowledge there is a big problem in the town of Littleton, mainly because you've got the highways that run through town. You've got quite a bit of state maintained roads that run through town, especially close to sensitive water bodies. He did mention that 153 Taylor Street and 151 Taylor Street have not been problem areas, but that doesn't discount the issue, and certainly doesn't discount the concern. So we looked at, and for any kind of recommendations beyond standard DOT practices and how they implement their salt. I live in New Hampshire. We have a pretty heavy brining program up here. I know that cuts down on actual, the actual weight and tonnage of salt that's used. But that doesn't seem to be a large or widespread use in your general area yet. But if there are contractors, snow removal contractors that are beginning to use it, that's certainly something to be looking towards, not just for this project, but for any project you folks are discussing going forward. The information that I've heard from not only New Hampshire DOT, but also the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center, is that going to use of brining can reduce salt by as much as 75%. They only end up using about a quarter of the salt. If you're not familiar with that, the easiest way to tell, if you've ever driven up, say, Route 93 or 495, right after you cross the border into New Hampshire, you see it in Maine, you see it in Vermont as well. It looks like somebody just striped the road with something wet. They put it down within 24 hours of a snowstorm, and it pre-treats the road. So what happens is the snow and the ice doesn't stick. So when the plow comes along, instead of having to try to figure out how to melt the ice and the snow, it can actually move it, because that brine puts a very thin film on the ground, and it doesn't tend to run off quite as much as the salt. You put the salt down out of a salt truck, it tends to bounce around. If you're close to a sensitive water body or wetland or any kind of other sensitive receptor, the salt has the ability to bounce off the pavement. So that's kind of what we found through our research. Like I said, we don't have any solid solutions for it. We are willing to commit to doing whatever it is that the town has been trying to do to reduce the salt. I think, some of the ideas that we heard about were promising. Brining is always a good idea, I think, but it just isn't a practice that's commonly employed in and around your area.
Mr. Moore, you mentioned your cost investigation of a carport type thing. Does that mean that it's feasible? And if so, wouldn't that be a solution? Because the whole entire area will be covered. You will not have to de-ice that area if it is covered by a roof. And if you have solar panels on the roof, it would just slough off. They're self-maintaining in general. Have you looked into that, and is that a solution?
That is not a solution at this point. So once you do that $28 per square foot, and you just put them on the van spaces. So you don't put them on the car spaces. You don't put them in the drive aisles. So just to cover the van spaces is just in excess of $5 million. The folks from Amazon that were on the call last time, and I think Calvin is on this time, We did have a discussion that one of the features of this project is that we are running electricity down to an underground vault to kind of pre-stage the lot for the future use of electric vehicle charging stations. And there was a brief discussion about whether or not it would be feasible at that point to put those carports in, because they're usually center, they're held up in the center, which are where the concrete strips are down between all the van spaces, and whether it would be a good idea to consider putting those in at that point with the solar panels that could help bolster the EV stations as well. And that's something that they would consider when that technology comes to this project. But for now, with the price increase of that much, it's just not feasible at this point.
Well, I mean, have you done some long-term number crunching? Because I would think that the reduction in maintenance costs also would make a huge difference in your long-term costs. Not just looking at your short-term costs.
Well, we haven't completely extended all those out to look at utility costs and things like that. But as far as the maintenance, we'd still have to be doing snow removal down through those areas. So every single one of those drive aisles would still have to be plowed. It would still have to be, whether it's salted, sanded, those kind of things. It would just be the strict parking spaces themselves that are covered by those carports. That's how those things function.
So Todd, the town has no salt areas. Can you just not use salt at all?
I don't think Amazon's willing to do that. No, it becomes a safety issue.
Well, then what about heated? That's another solution.
A heated parking lot of that size?
Yep.
I think they could, it's something that they would consider if it was just a sidewalk, the sidewalk that goes up 153 Taylor, but I don't, not something to that extent, no.
Well, I think the technology exists. We just on our previous, which I'm sure you were all listening, had a conversation on a much smaller scale project. So if we're talking about volcanic ash in the western part of the US, we can certainly talk about solar, where Amazon is making a commitment to that as well. So I think Julie certainly brings up a good point.
Yeah, your solar could be used to power your heating of the parking lot as well. I mean, this is Amazon. We can afford $5 million for this.
That's on top of on top of the construction cost already.
Yeah, but
I think regardless, and so I take issue with that. I think regardless of who the applicant is, we are foremost looking at the long-term effects of this much coverage on a sensitive site.
Well, that's what I mean. Right. Amazon could afford
comes back to it, and doesn't matter if it's school bus parking, we would have the same technology required.
Oh yeah, it definitely. But I would think that it's such it would be such an advantage for the site and so environmentally beneficial. And I just, yeah.
Well, one solution is no salt. Like you asked Todd what the town does in areas.
If you have no salt areas and
salt-free area, that's a solution, is a salt-free area. That's what we do for sensitive areas. And, certainly historically, salt has been used because it, public safety, and it's what's on hand. But as properties are redeveloped, we look to, with all properties, like Sarah just said, we just had the same conversation on a smaller scale, and we have this conversation with every project almost. We look to do better because we know better, and we didn't know, even 5 or 10 years ago that we had a major chloride problem in our groundwater from salt from the roads. And, the highways are there and they're not going away, but that doesn't mean we can make it worse, and so I just want to circle it back to, this would be the conversation, with any project.
And I think that's why we've been kind of, hinting and kind of reaching out. I'm glad you brought up the fact that you had no salt areas in the community, because I wasn't aware of that. But we've been kind of, dancing around the idea of, well, what else have you been doing in town? You haven't been heating large scale parking lots, I don't think. If you have, tell me where they are, and I will try to find out who built them and if they were cost effective. But I don't think
doesn't have one.
Right.
Definitely, we were recommending heated driveway, a really long heated driveway. We also recommended that because of salt. It isn't just, this isn't just a localized suggestion.
But what we can do, we can talk about the potential for the no salt areas with the folks from Amazon, and I mean that's a very good solution for several reasons. One, it gets rid of the salt. Second, when you're not using salt, a lot of times, depending on what you're doing for other types of snow removal, snow and ice removal for your maintenance, it ends up being cheaper. Salt's not inexpensive. Unfortunately, people think it is, but it's not. It's very pricey.
And there are shortages.
Yep. Yeah, it's because I put it in my water softener all winter long, which it takes forever. But it's expensive.
Can we come back also to the question of the monitoring wells? And I would just like to have some history brought back forth on the two lots. And I recognize there are old monitoring wells there, and what is going forward, where are we bringing them back into production so that we are able to monitor this? And Amy, you might be, you might know this from a historical standpoint. They're there. When was the last time they've been monitored? And going forward, what's our plan to monitor them in the future?
Littleton Water District monitors them. It's still ongoing. They've never stopped.
Okay.
Yep. You know what the previous tenants used for keeping the parking lot clear?
Well, they haven't really been using it to the extent that Amazon is looking at either.
Right, and roof runoff is different from parking lot runoff, and so a large portion of the current site is roof runoff. Although I will acknowledge that the stormwater treatment is not, up to date as the applicant would make it at this point. So that is
right, but there could be a challenge that the existing can be very different than what we're looking as the proposed. And I think that's where a lot of us kind of toggle back and forth.
So where are we going to end up with salt then? Are we going to?
I know the town has been pre-treating their roads for a snowstorm. I was kind of wondering what they're using.
Right. So I think Littleton is aware of brining. I think all of us are astutely aware of brining throughout New England. So we have in fact used it before in our community.
Okay, then that's a good that's a good opportunity to start cutting down on the salt use. The issue that I think we have, and we face this in a lot of different communities throughout New England that we work in, is just to completely get rid of the salt is difficult. Like you said, there are some no salt areas. I think those are probably mostly roadways. You see no salt roadways, low salt roadways. But anytime you start to introduce pedestrian traffic into those areas where there are going to be people walking, I think you run into some issues that are a little bit more challenging to overcome. So
I think one thing that concerns me more about this site is that historically it does look like it was a wetland that was filled. And just by evidence of your test pits with your, nice uniform sand, it's just a lot more well drained than, some of our till or some of our other soils that are mixed. And so I'm wondering if, there's a way to maybe slow the water down, slow the runoff down, or capture and precipitate salt. I'm just trying to think of the natural action, but I do think, again, with the location of this site, it's, just this, parking lot with the wetlands along the side and, our zone 2 aquifer, and beneath the site is this really uniform grained, and well-drained material. We really aren't going to be able, the infiltration, it's not going to slow it down much. And the salt is just going to go right through. And so I don't know if you can look at slowing the water down, so that maybe the salt can dry.
It's a bit of a double-edged sword, because we in the wintertime we have the salt issue that we're discussing now, but in the summertime, and we discussed this at the last meeting, we also have thermal issues. So to combat the thermal issues, it turns out the best thing to do is to get it underground quickly. Don't leave it in a pond. Don't leave it at the surface. Don't use it above ground swale. Get it in the ground. Get it underground quickly.
Can you paint the parking lot white so that the albedo is better?
Actually, in some instances,
concrete.
We did this up at, that was one of the better features at 151 is the concrete aprons in the back. Just for that reason, you get much more reflectivity off of it, so you don't get as warm of a surface.
It seems like, making the albedo situation more favorable seems like that might not be an overcomable.
Yeah, but then, okay, but that doesn't help me with the salt though. So there's got to be a middle
to slow the water down. So your concern with slowing the water down was creating an issue with the heat. So if you make the parking lot lighter and slow the water down, you're dealing with the heat and the salt.
Yeah. Let me see what we can do to slow the water down. I hadn't thought about that, so I don't have any ideas right off the top of my head. I'm not sure if I've ever tried to purposely slow the water down like that. But let me see what we can look at for those, and then maybe go from there.
So for the salt, it's a major safety issue. I mean, there are cars coming on to this, and there's various ages and abilities coming in and out of the parking lots, and people will be walking around. And I understand the concern here, but just a question at the point, the retail, what type of salting applications do you guys, I'm just thinking of other large commercial areas where there's a lot of foot traffic. What type of salt applications, because we're happy to hit the minimum limit, but we need to balance that with safety. And the only way to do that is salt at this point. We're more than happy to do brining pre-treatments and handle it that way. But at the end of the day, we do need to make sure that this gets down to pavement, again, just for slip and falls. And it could be just a sheet of ice out there if we don't handle this correctly. So, I mean, we're open to suggestions, but just for some of the other large commercial areas, what are you guys doing there?
I think it would be very difficult to compare apples to apples in a layman's term. And I think Amy could maybe reference some of the larger sites. Obviously, this is a very sensitive site, and we do have others as well. So I don't know if we can give you that data right off the top of our head. Perhaps the commissioners might be able to reference that. Amy, I'm not sure if you have anything off the top of your head.
I was wondering about the Abbey.
The planning board.
Something that would be new, though. So we recognize there are older parking lots, and we don't feel as though those would be comparable. So we would look at something perhaps, and then we get into moving of snow storage, which obviously we talked about at the point with that at great length. So I think perhaps the planning board could help you with that. But the planning board has to take into effect the sensitivity of the wetlands. So while we've had great discussion on salt, I'd also like to still talk about the floodplain this evening as well. And so we recognize in the essence of time to carry on if there's other conversations that we'd like to have for this site. So I am concerned as the site has been altered and would like to make sure that we're really following our diligence with FEMA and understanding that we've really looked at what previous owners of the land have had and if it flooded at any point, and also how we're looking at that.
Sure. I have some slides that I want to go through that may help explain this.
And Amy, while he's referring to his maps, can you, I know I had asked you to reference that section prior because I don't have my handbook with me this evening. If you can just go through and just read for the commission that section outlining that, that would be helpful.
So the definition of bordering land subject to flooding, BLSF, under the Wetland Protection Act, is the boundary is the estimated maximum lateral extent from the statistical 100-year storm on your FEMA map. The boundary is determined by reference to the most recently available, flood profile data prepared under the National Flood Insurance Program by FEMA. That boundary is determined to be accurate, and that presumption is rebuttable and may be overcome only by credible evidence from a registered professional engineer or other professional competent in such matters. And they do say that when the flood profile data is not available, the commission, the issuing authority, can require the applicant to either determine it by engineering or whatever historical observations there may have been. Sorry, that's paraphrasing, but well, there you go.
So that was the first part of what she read. So, and then let me back to the beginning. So when we first started looking at this lower end, well, we actually got this when we did the 151 site as well as the 153 site. Shown here in blue is the 1% chance or the 100-year floodplain. And on here you see the elevations 226, 226, 226, 226.2 right there, 226, 226.2, 226. It's flat. It's a very flat floodplain. There's not a lot of there's not much of a velocity vector through here, as evidenced by just really no change in elevation coming through. Oh, another 226 right here. On the site.
And not, sorry to interrupt you, sir, but none of that has been altered ever in this area that you're referencing.
I'm not saying that. I'm just
trying to look at historically if this is land. You know, we talk about these beautiful sands and things like that. So I'm curious, just to be diligent, if this is an area that potentially was altered.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you right now. I think it's definitely been altered. So if you overlay that, here's that same floodplain, the same flood map, onto that existing site. Here's the driveway that comes down through. There's the existing building right there. And you see all the 226 marks all the way around. Yep. Zoom in just a little bit. This purple shade that I have on here is that floodplain. And when you take the 226 contour based on the survey at the same datum, you get this blue line right here, which is remarkably similar to where we flagged the wetlands. The finished floor of the existing buildings at 237. The absolute lowest point on this site is right here in this corner. It's at 232.68. There's a catch basin sitting right here. So you compare them to the 226 flood elevation. The building's 11 feet above. The lowest point of the parking lot is over 6.5 feet above. I think sometime from what I can tell, in the early to mid 80s, it was something happened. It was filled. It was altered. But the conclusion that we came to when we look at the definition of bordering land subject to flooding is that we're not in a floodplain because the flood profile data insinuates 226 is the 100-year storm. We're well above that. So
okay. Have we, Amy, and you might recall this, has Green looked into this, or has it been on their radar to talk about floodplain?
Yeah, I double checked with them, and they basically pretty much said the same thing. They reviewed what Todd just went through, and they conclude that they agree with the applicant's claim that the FEMA maps topography has not been updated based on previous improvements to the site, and that this proposed work is unlikely to impact the floodplain or require compensatory storage. So in other words, the 226 cross-section elevation is correct. The actual plan that shows it going across the site is incorrect.
Yeah, this old flood maps, which I'm not sure I've seen it to quite this extent before, but we've seen it in many areas in the past where they just use older USGS topography to define the actual graphical lines. But it always makes everybody's life, I think, easier when they actually have the flood profile data printed right on the maps or available in the actual studies, the flood insurance studies that you can get from FEMA as well. So I think in this case, the USGS just has never really caught up with the reality. So, but Sarah, to your point,
so
I'm not going to sit here and tell you the site's never been altered.
Feel any better? So I would defer to the commissioners on that. So that leaves me a little uneasy to be working with an altered site.
I think you'll find at one point that was an esker and was gravelled out for either Route 2 or 495. And when Taylor Street is definitely raised. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that some of that went into the Taylor Street being raised and straightened at some point when they put in 495.
Right. So I think this is healthy conversation, getting back to our concerns of salt and, you know, some of Julie's concerns as well. So I think it's a good conversation.
So all right.
I guess I'm.
So if the so if the USGS topo still has what we're seeing matches the FEMA Fermet, is that what I'm hearing? The USGS topo still matches the FEMA Fermet?
I don't know.
That's not the reality. Obviously, it's not reality. But
to get the good USGS topo, you've got to go back to 1988. So you know the current USGS topos from 2015, 2017, they skip too many contour intervals and you can't really tell. But
they didn't want to get in and figure out what was happening. So, okay, so again, so we have reality, we have what the site actually is, but is there any, you know, mass GIS, any other source that indicates that we're not allowing the alteration of a floodplain or going beyond our
you're not allowing the alteration of a floodplain because we don't meet the definition of a floodplain under the current Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act.
But from the feds,
the graphical depiction of this doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that there's actually flood profile data, which is the 226 elevations that they show in the AE zone here. So if we go back to that definition, said boundary shall be that determined by reference to the most recently available flood profile data prepared for the community within which the work is proposed. The flood profile data is what governs, not the map itself. It's not the graphical depiction. So when you have actual elevation
profile data, can you pull that up?
It's right there. It's your 226 elevations within those zones.
Okay, except that, so I guess again, that doesn't make me feel any better, because what we know is reality is that the lowest elevation on site is 232 and some change, but we have these official documents saying it's 226. I'm just wondering, that's beyond our
I don't think
jurisdiction to determine, and whether we can, you know, I guess I'm a little uneasy about how to proceed to. I wonder
and I agree. This is why I brought it forth to the commission, because I would prefer to have someone who is more knowledgeable in floodplain when we're used to things lining up and matching it, and I don't think they do. And
it doesn't.
Talking to a very sensitive site here, and I just want to make sure that we're being diligent. So,
I think you are. I think, you know, you have a peer reviewer or a peer review consultant that works for the town who reviewed this as well.
Right, but it was not flagged as one of our concerns. So I would ask that go back to them and say, this is really one of our concerns. And
it did. That is why I got this most recent email from Green. I specifically asked them, his email is dated October 14th. And I sent him the query on October 14th. Just very specifically asking about the floodplain difference between, as you say, the graphical representation and the actual flood profile data.
And a regulatory interpretation that we're acting within our jurisdiction.
That's the last sentence there is the presumption is rebuttable and overcome by credible evidence. So it's a question of whether or not you consider this credible evidence. And they aren't questioning the flood profile data.
No, not at all. We're looking at the flood profile data to make that determination. So what the point is that we're trying to make is that if you look at the definition of bordering land subject to flooding, and it references you to the flood profile data, not necessarily the graphical depiction of it, just the flood profile data itself, then this is the conclusion you end up with, that's the floodplain. The blue line on here is the floodplain. And everything above that is outside of the floodplain. And, you know, I would understand a concern if we were a half a foot above it, where you could say, well, you know, maybe the survey wasn't real well done, and maybe you need a more dense smattering of points to identify that 226 contour. But we're not even close. We're, like I said, over 6.5 feet above it. That's the existing site. Those are not our proposed elevations, by the way, just so everybody's aware. That's the existing site that was constructed in, I hope Larry's still on because he was part of that project, 1988, I think.
That's mean.
Wait, does he remember? Larry, did you fill wetlands in 1988?
No, I've been dying to jump in, but I don't like to get in Todd's way. First time I was on the site was about 1978. And what I distinctly remember was two gravel pit operations. So where 151 was located, and I believe the Board of Health agent at the time was Peter Casaneri, or the chairman of the Board of Health. And he came out and witnessed all the perk tests. So that image that you're seeing in front of you right now was a gravel pit. And I don't know what caused that gravel pit to be created, but as was mentioned earlier, I suspect it was 495. You know, that the construction of that interstate highway had a voracious appetite for sand and gravel for all the fill. And somebody commented about an esker. If you look at a USGS map, to the south of this site, there's a classic example of an esker. You know, you can see that sort of serpentine ridge of sand and gravel. So this is a type of site that I think was mined from the top down, and it was sort of haphazard. If you've ever been in a gravel pit, sometimes they need gravel, sometimes they need sand, so they mine different portions at different rates. But it's not. Somebody made a comment earlier about perhaps it's a wetland that has been filled. It's not that. I think rather it was some fairly substantial deposits of sand and gravel in this whole Beaverbrook Valley that were mined and then left at a very haphazard operation. This land was actually, the family that owned it bequeathed it to Wesley College in Cambridge, and they had no idea what to do with it, so they put it on the market. Along came Digital Equipment and bought the land from Wesley College and designed and permitted. It was permitted by your Conservation Commission. And if you know her, Judy Pickett at the time was the chair of the Conservation Commission, and she never let anything get by in those days. So that's a brief history. I hope I didn't bore you too much.
I think the chairman got edification on that because he is the one that knew of the Esker. So we're very privileged to have such knowledge between you and he.
Yeah, definitely cool information.
I could go on for a couple of hours if you'd like.
Oh, no.
No. There were several of those Eskers in that area. Knoxfield was another one, and then the one over the other side of Route 2, where all the houses are, where the engineer lives. They were all Eskers that were used in the highways.
Yes.
Yeah. Plenty of demand for our sand and gravel here in town.
So I think kind of circling back around, we've talked about parking, groundwater, flows, salt impacts, floodplain. What are we asking the applicant to bring forth going forward? Any other commissioners have any concerns or comments?
Maybe as minimal a treatment as possible for de-icing the parking lot and keeping it safe.
I would like a little bit further investigation into parking garage options, and therefore, if it's a parking garage, you won't have that icing and the snow removal that you were mentioning. It's such a sensitive site. I really want some serious review of those options.
Anybody get anything else they want to add?
I think we just talked earlier about the albedo and slowing the water down. We know we did talk about the parking deck. But it's a sensitive site. What we did 5 years ago on a large sensitive site, doesn't apply. This is, this is information that, is new. As far as the chloride, every site is different, and creating a very, 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 very large impervious area to run off into our zone, to infiltrate into our zone 2 and run off into wetlands. We need to do better than the minimum requirement of a parking lot built 5 years ago.
That's right.
I agree. I think we all agree on that.
Yep.
So I think because Amazon touts themselves as being environmentally conscious and what they're going to be doing in the future with electric vehicles, and this would be a perfect site to start that on. And it could potentially be a demonstration site for Amazon. So I think you're probably hearing what the commissioners are saying, that we just like a little more thought.
Well, I hear all of that, and I think we do have some new ideas and some new things to take a look at. The slowing down of the water is certainly a new one. With all due respect, as far as the parking garage and the decks, we did take a look at those. We priced them out to the point of talking to contractors, make sure that the pricing data was correct. The decks are typically about half to a third of the price of an actual parking garage. We're ruling out decks just because the cost of that is a non-starter. It's just not economically feasible. So if a parking deck itself isn't economically feasible, an actual garage, it's not. I didn't go as far as to get the actual pricing on it, but I do know. I told you about $18,000 per parking space for a deck. You're upwards of $35,000 plus per parking space for a garage. So you're probably close to $20 million for a parking garage. That's just not a discussion that can sustain any kind of economic reality.
But so many businesses construct parking garages. So I guess I'm uncertain why Amazon is restricting this particular project and not considering it like a business, a building. And and investing into a building, a proper parking garage, especially in such a sensitive site.
So those uses, so if you're in an office or retail building, those uses obviously have larger parking requirements by zoning code. So that's, and they are often located on, you know, tighter sites. But since we do have 153 where we can accommodate the parking, that's why we, you know, we don't need to have a parking deck there. But if you were on a smaller site with, I forget the previous parking count for 153, but it was, Todd, you might have those numbers, but it's significantly higher traffic count. And that's why, what's that, Todd?
I think it was about 690.
So that's, in those uses on tighter sites, that's where developers often have to, you know, go vertical on that. And you know, just again, with the higher traffic counts, that's why you need a parking deck to accommodate the additional parking.
As far as we talked last time, and actually the Amazon folks talked about this as well, about the electric vehicles, the charging, and the potential for carports with the solar. That technology is coming to this area. It's just not here yet. So they don't have the electric vans. They don't have the infrastructure to support it. But that is one of the reasons that the parking lot is designed with the concrete strips, so those can be popped out and we can get the conduit in. And also with the electrical service coming down to the manhole. So they did actually commit to doing that when those options are available on this site, but they just aren't here. They don't have the fleet yet.
So the technology is here to build the solar powered carports. So why can't you just put those in and just get yourself prepared? Because I mean, that solar power can easily be used. If it's not being used for vehicles, it can be used for some other.
The other building.
At least you'll have them in. If it's not that far off and you're doing your construction, it seems like the proper time to put them in.
I don't know if they know when the timing of it is, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so the timing on the electric vehicles, that needs to roll out. And I think you guys have all seen the commercial. I think it is in California. And I don't know how many of these have actually rolled out in Amazon, but it's small. And I think they're using, you know, in California, I can't speak to their emission standards but I think it might be more prevalent in that specific location. But it takes time for this to roll out, especially across the country, and given the number of vehicles and how they're opening. They plan to do it in the future, but they don't know exactly when. So that's where, you know, we've stubbed it down to that location, and then when the time is appropriate, but when they do have the operation up and running. But to go from kind of 0 to 60 on a full electric fleet is just, it's not feasible at this point.
Well, actually, you're going to have lighting in a parking area, so it could power your lighting there as well.
I wasn't saying go directly to the fleet. I was basically talking about installing the solar carports.
It's a significant cost. It's a significant cost right now. I forget the exact, but it's a couple $1 million to install the electric carports, and for them about $5 million. So to install carports and not have a direct use for them, it's just not economical.
Would you be using that solar power in the building up above, in the building you're building now? I mean, you must have to use a lot of electricity in that to run that.
Well,
and
then there's
the federal rebate is still in effect right now and next year. You're going to get your costs back. You could put it into the grid.
It's not as easy just to put it into the grid. You have to have cross connection and agreements with the utility providers, and those take a long time. And that's
very common on every house that has solar.
You do have solar, but it also takes years and years and years to get the connection agreements done with the utility providers.
So we are very fortunate that we have Littleton Light and Water. Have you reached out to them to ask them if they are willing to have that?
No, we have not, because like I said,
you might find that on a more local level that might be more agreeable. Just to turn the conversation around a little bit, let's talk about monitoring wells. So going forward, I would like to propose to the commission that we ask the water department what they're currently searching for in those particular wells, and if we may have to modify that going forward based on the use. And also, if we need to change proximity, which I don't anticipate, but also the frequency of testing, especially in the first 2 or 3 years. So I would defer to Corey Godfrey and his team to see. So I would ask that you reach out to them, or Amy, perhaps you could do that and have a cross dialogue.
Yep, I believe we actually have their most recent, at least one round of testing, if not the last 2 rounds of testing.
Right, but that recognizing they may be testing for other.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'll reach out to him again. We got those when we asked him about the salt problem.
Stronger pre-construction, during construction, and then after, and then going forward. Any of the commissioners have any other things they want to bring up before we ask if they would like to continue this hearing?
We had talked about trash last time, like fencing and trash, and it sounded like you have the wood guardrails that you're going to remove.
We're taking those off, and then we talked about putting them on that. We had the discussion about when I was out there actually flagging the wetlands, how most of it was clean, but then when you came around the corner on the northerly side, all of a sudden there was an abundance of trash in that area. So it was pretty easy to see where it all seems to be blowing. So we did a couple of different things. We put a fairly dense row of evergreen trees off that end of the parking lot. And then we also talked about putting the wood guardrail back up with a chain link mesh on the back of it to help catch any of that. The other thing that we've talked about with the planning board and the town planner as well is how the site is maintained. So this is a little bit different in that you have an ownership group, which Brian's on the screen right now to discuss, but you also have a national tenant. And so Amazon won't own this. So Northbridge will own it. So Amazon's already made commitments that, they have their own staff. They want to have a clean site. They want to make sure that it's clean. And then Brian and his folks are there also to not only enforce that, but it's their property. So when the Amazon lease is over, it's their property. They still have to figure out what to do with it. So if it's got a reputation as being an eyesore or something like that, it certainly doesn't do their value any good. So we do have the opportunity in this case that we kind of have 2 sets of eyes, so to speak.
Yeah, and as ownership, just to drive this home, we take pride in our properties, and it takes a couple minutes to get the first. You only get one chance to give a first impression, and we keep our properties clean, and it represents us. People are coming on and off the site, and we might have investors touring, or just we take pride in ownership. So trash I can guarantee you will never be an issue, and if it is, we'll have that addressed. That's just a non-starter for us and with our property management group. So if there ever is something that comes up, we will immediately address it. It's a non-factor for us, or a non-starter with our management group.
Brian, thank you for bringing that up. Does that also pertain to contaminants as well?
I don't think any contaminants will be on site.
No, or if the wetlands happen to be contaminated, the wells, any part of the water source there. So Northbridge will be responsible?
Yes, we're the owner. So yes, it all comes down to us.
We can make that noted.
The site is categorized as a LUFL. I'm assuming you're familiar with that acronym.
Are you asking me, or are you asking Brian?
I guess both. Do you want to
the owner of the site?
No, we're very familiar with it. Every type of facility, every time we do a facility like this, we run into it. So
it's a land use of higher pollution
potential, yep.
By definition.
Mm-hmm.
And so parking lots have grease and drippings from cars, and it's not clean. Like there's absolutely runoff from.
Right. It's one of the reasons that we have to pre-treat the stormwater to a bit higher degree before we infiltrate it.
Right, and then you're going to, you need an industrial stormwater permit too, correct?
No, we don't.
You don't? You're
no industrial discharges.
Okay.
I've got to run, everybody. Have a good night.
Right.
Just as a point of knowledge for me, what is the parameter that would then bring you up to industrial discharge? Larry, you might have more experience with that.
Warehouses are subject. You know,
I'm just curious why this is not.
I'm surprised it's not. I'm not
sure to hear that. Larry, with your experience
on this site, it's
particular use on this site.
Well, it's a parking lot, and I think it goes into the LEPL status because it's fleet type vehicles. But there is no industrial waste in a parking lot that's used as a LEPL type facility.
Right, but just to clarify, you don't have to have an industrial use. A warehouse is subject to the NIFTY's industrial stormwater discharge permit. I wasn't familiar with, I didn't look up fleet storage specifically, but a little surprised that it's not.
Well, that's how we always encounter it is, the discussion is, and with these facilities, they're clearly fleet storage facilities. So they fall into the LEPL category, but there is no building on the site. So it's just a parking lot.
Okay. Is that why you don't put up a parking garage? Because then you have a building? Anna?
I've been...
I don't think that would change anything.
We're actually not that clever.
Curious.
Thank you.
I've been listening to the discussion on the solar. And it's interesting because I think we got into that discussion because we're trying to resolve the salt issue. So if we do blanket the entire site with solar panels, and we've designed a lot of big, massive 5-acre solar facilities, they're very efficient at shedding snow. So those panels are mounted at an angle, primarily for sun, but it has a glass surface, and as soon as the snow hits it, it slips right off. And if it doesn't slip off at night, it does slip off in the morning as soon as the sun comes up and warms up the panel. So, I was trying to make the connection about how did we get from a low salt use to a solar panel. And I admire solar energy. We've designed lots of facilities that have put a lot of power back into the grid. But even if we blanketed this entire facility with solar panels, we'd still be out there having to plow snow in the morning after a snowstorm. So I'm not sure that the erection of a bunch of solar panels solves the salt issue. Yeah. There's better ways of doing it.
Let me I just want to circle back to the industrial discharge because we can just put this to rest right now. So there's, let's see, 11 categories that require a industrial stormwater discharge permit. So I'm just going to read right down through them real quick.
Can you do a screen share of that, please?
What's that?
Can you do a screen share of what you're referencing?
I can.
Or just tell us what you're referencing so Amy can note it?
I think it doesn't because
find my screen that I'm
moving. It doesn't include vehicles.
Did that come up? Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right. Category 1 these are the facilities subject to federal stormwater effluent discharges. And that's things such as airport de-icing, aluminum forming, asbestos manufacturing. I can run right down through them all if you'd like me to list them. But while Larry was speaking, I kind of scrolled down through and I didn't see anything that would apply. The second category, heavy manufacturing, paper mills, chemical plants, things like that. We are certainly not that. Coal and mineral mining. We are not doing any of that. Hazardous waste treatment, storage, and disposal. Nope. Landfills, land application sites, and open dumps. No. Metal scrap yards, salvage yards, automobile junk yards. steam electric power generating facilities, transportation facilities that have vehicle maintenance, equipment cleaning, or airport de-icing operations. So again, not us. Treatment works, treating domestic sewage, no. Construction sites that disturb 5 acres or more. However, those are permitted separately. And that's under the construction general permit where you get those. And then category 11 is light manufacturing, food processing, printing, publishing, electronic and other electrical equipment manufacturing.
And warehousing and storage.
And warehousing, public warehousing and storage.
So your other facility will be subject.
It will not.
It's a warehouse, isn't it?
It's not any of those.
It's not a warehouse?
It's not a public warehouse.
It's not a public warehouse, right?
Yeah, there's a difference.
It doesn't have to be public. What's your what's the SIC code? Is it
public warehouse right there?
Yeah, it says public warehousing and storage. It's not us.
Regular warehousing is something.
I can look up the SIC. I don't have the SIC code in front of me, but it's not.
Okay. No problem.
I do appreciate you asking that question because we've done several of these facilities with Northbridge, and we have not had to get any industrial discharge permits. Nobody's actually ever asked that question. So it was useful for me to.
It would have made me feel better about that there was some sort of additional stopgap, because if you look at category 8, you know, the intent of category 8, you know, it's close.
I don't know. I mean, we're not, I see that. I think because they have airport de-icing, I think bus terminals.
Yeah.
Oh, that says or, it's not all inclusive.
No, I understand. But when you start to include airport de-icing in the.
Yeah, you know, I know airport de-icing is very different.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I read that and I think bus, like transportation facility, I'm thinking a bus terminal.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But anyway,
no, it is. But it acknowledges transportation facilities have higher pollutant loads, which is why we're having this conversation in the first place. And you wouldn't put a bus transportation facility on this site. It's very sensitive.
But if we had a transportation facility that did not have on-site maintenance, we wouldn't need that permit. So.
Right. I would think that the maintenance part of it is what may generate, you know, you have to have storage of oil and other things where.
Right. And here we don't, we're not maintaining these. We're not changing, nobody's changing any oil down there. Right. I think the most intensive maintenance they may do is if somebody actually gets a flat tire, they may change the tire on the van in the parking lot instead of having a tow truck come. But no fueling, no maintenance, no washing, none of that. So
if we go back and look at the design, when we started this project and knew that we were going to be coming in front of the Conservation Commission, we closely examined the 8 interests of the Wetlands Protection Act. And that's actually where you guys have your authority. And as I understand the regs, the real decision here is, have we designed the project sufficiently to protect the 8 interests of the Wetlands Protection Act? And I think if you think about the discussion that we're having, it's fairly focused on a couple of issues. Nobody has raised most of the 8 interests. So we're down to, I would suspect, prevention of pollution. And I think, you know, what we have to ask ourselves is, does the insertion of a parking garage provide a greater degree of environmental protection than what we've already designed into the parking lot for stormwater management? In terms of the economic argument, I agree. There are parking garages all over the place, and we've looked at that pretty carefully. Where you find them is downtown Boston, because it doesn't matter how much a parking garage costs, because it will pay for itself. And I can remember the days when there was no parking garages outside of 128. And the first time somebody built a parking garage out on 128, that was an amazing event because the economics had gotten to that point. And I would look at 495, and as you were discussing, I was trying to rack my brain about it. Where is there a parking garage on 495? And I can't really think of one. Certainly not. Where?
Emerson Hospital. All the hospitals have parking garages.
Sure.
There's one up in the air now. The mass transit just built.
Sure. Which was publicly funded. So probably price was no object. So I guess the question is, and if you do a deck, you're going to still have to salt the upper end of the deck. So the only way to avoid salt is to build a parking garage with a roof on it, but you still have to deal with the stormwater runoff and somehow segregate it. So I think really the question is have we addressed the 8 interests of the Act adequately for the Commission? And I suspect there's a little bit more convincing that we have to do, or a little bit more documentation that we have to provide in order to make you feel comfortable that we have protected the 8 interests. But I think we've narrowed the scope down quite a bit. I think Julie's given us some, at least a suggestion to think about where the stormwater runoff starts and where it ends and what happens to it along the way. And we didn't do a minimal design on this, knowing where we are. And, you know, when I first worked on these sites back in, late 70s, early 80s, Beaverbrook Valley, even back then, it was a very important water resource. It's probably even more important today. And as this design worked its way through our office, I kept emphasizing to 2 of the guys that you see on the screen, Matt and Todd, that, you know, this will be an issue. So there's no point in doing a marginal design and then coming in and having them corrected on us. Let's put our best foot forward. Let's do it once. That's what Northbridge has always told us, is that, look, we don't want to be cheap on these things. We want to do what's right. And I think that's what we've done. We can answer any other of the questions that come up, but I guess I would fall back to, have we protected the 8 interests of the Act? And I think we have to a pretty good extent. If we haven't, we should talk about that, and we could see how we can provide extra degree of protection. But I don't think we achieve that with solar panels, and I don't think we achieve it with a parking garage. I think we need to manage the site much better, or not much better. We need to manage the site properly using the minimum amount of salt or de-icing compounds necessary to ensure public safety. And then, you know, there is a lot of sand and gravel around here, so we could certainly spread a lot of sand and gravel on the parking lot and trap it in our sediment basins and catch basins and manholes. But I think the design that we've produced has been pretty good, and it's been through a peer review. And I'm not aware of any significant problems that the peer review has had with our design, or they've more or less agreed with the design. So I'm kind of racking my brain about what we can do to make it better, because I think we've already tried our best to do that.
Amy, are there any questions that you would like to ask of them?
I don't think so. Actually, the only question I had of you guys, are you set with the BLSF piece, or do you need something else from them? I know they're going to go away and think more about this de-icing basically issue, but I wasn't sure if you guys are all set with the floodplain piece. Basically,
their survey compared to that map is pretty clear to me that you use the data and not the map that was generated back in whenever that was.
I've definitely seen that before, that you end up, I've never seen a discrepancy quite this bad, but you do use the elevations, not.
I mean, I think that's why I'm comfortable using the elevation, is because of the discrepancy. Like he had mentioned, if you're talking half a foot, that those elevations are off, then that could be some user error. But to see 5.5, 6.5 feet, I'm pretty confident that area had been raised up and that map is no longer correct.
I think
they're lucky there is an actual cross section or profile for the area, because that's not always the case.
I mean, I think the reality of the site is indisputable. It's obviously, you know, the elevations are way higher. You know, I'd perhaps maybe Todd, if you could give us a little more comfort with, you know, the process, just to ensure, you know, from a regulatory standpoint, you're not supposed to be submitting something that, I know you're not going to approach FEMA to change their maps because that takes forever. I 100% understand that. But is there something else that, you know, the applicant should be doing to demonstrate this to some other agency other than us? You know, because it can be very easy to be like, well, this is obvious, you know, why would this be an issue? And, you know, I don't know what I don't know from that standpoint. You know, I don't think it's an issue. Obviously the elevations work out. But
yeah, and here's my experience working in those floodplains, where we run into issues and where we don't. So when let's just say for a minute, this was a floodplain and we all agreed we're in the map and we're down low in the elevations. If we were just doing a parking lot in the floodplain with no building, then the reality is there probably wouldn't be flood insurance involved. We would have to provide compensatory storage because we would meet the Wetlands Protection Act definition of bordering land subject to flooding. And so we'd have to provide the compensatory storage, and that's the regulatory mechanism on it. When you introduce a building into it and you're definitely in that floodplain, then you have a couple of different options. One, you elevate the building. If it's a residential structure, you have to be a foot above that elevation. If it's a commercial structure, you can be right at it. But you would still have to provide compensatory storage. We're doing a project in another community just outside of Boston right now, where it's a mixed use project where we're right in that floodplain and we're putting the building right in it. And we certainly had to provide it. But again, we met that definition in the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act of bordering land subject to flooding. There was no doubt about it. The data concluded it, the mapping concluded it, all just pointed there. So there was no issue. And that's the regulatory framework that we usually work within. When we provide the compensatory storage, we work with either the town engineer or the peer review engineer or whoever else is reviewing it on behalf of the town, Conservation Commission, planning staff, to make sure those are right. And then we go on. But in the case where there is no apparent floodplain, because we don't meet the definition in the Wetlands Protection Act, I'm not sure who else to ask.
That's my problem.
Yeah, no, I understand.
If you are doing floodplain construction and you were dealing with the compensatory storage and you were dealing with all that, I would actually be more comfortable than. Well,
it's simple. We've done it. Everybody's done it, so it's right. you know the process.
I mean,
it's a little bit odd.
So I saw your slides. I mean, it looks like you have, you obviously have comprehensive information pulled together about this issue. I'm wondering if maybe a memo for Amy's files in the event that we get asked this information, that it's in a nice, clean package dealing specifically with this issue.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
And then you have the information.
Yep. And then you can
say, I could interject, because the regulations also say the determination made by a professional engineer. So I think, Todd, if you put it on our letterhead and sign it, you've satisfied the regulations.
Yep. Okay.
And I also I don't know if the original owners are accessible or not, if you can get a statement from them that the site has not flooded.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, going back to 19... How about a statement from me? Since 1977, I'm not aware of any flooding. But it's hard to prove the negative, and I suppose we could apply for flood insurance and see if they give it to us, and they probably wouldn't because we're outside the floodplain. But I like the idea of us boiling all that information down into a concise memo, attaching all the graphics, and putting it on our letterhead and making a statement exactly to the point that this is our opinion. That it's not a floodplain. Frankly, we have to do that for the financing anyway, Todd.
That works for me if other commissioners are okay with that.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Okay, that's good.
And Amy, of course, goes without saying.
Anybody else got any more comments?
So I remember just one thing. The last time when we were meeting with you on 151, the issue came up about mitigation, and we were sort of at this impasse about, you know, we weren't violating anything, but there was a need for perhaps some mitigation. And I think the final resolution was, how about if we make a contribution to the tree fund? And which I know is something Northbridge was willing to do because they're going to be here for a long time, and if they can contribute to a community fund like that. And what I'm trying to do is I don't think we've done a design that requires mitigation, but in the terms of the commissioners feeling satisfied that everything's been examined, every interest has been protected, and that perhaps we've gone above and beyond. I'm curious if there is some mitigation that we could do just to show that good faith gesture that Amazon through Northbridge is here for the long term and is willing to make plant trees, donate trees, contribute to conservation funds, do something. Not because we need to, but because we want to, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to think of ideas.
Well, I know the Common needed a bunch of trees, but I don't think they've already been planted. They lost a lot in that last windstorm.
We got a grant for the tree common planting. And I have spoken with Larry and Northbridge about their original offer at 151 Taylor, which was not part of the order conditions. But they are still willing, and especially in this case, when the Brown property came up, in making a donation towards the Brown property purchase, which is all trees. And that was the issue at 151, was the amount of trees that were coming down. There is not a tree fund that the town has set up that they could donate to. And we had talked about, it's very complicated. So it occurred to me when Brown came up that might be a way of doing this. Or 151, where the trees were the issue.
Does the Shade Tree Committee not take donations?
They can. It gets to be a real headache about where the money goes in, where it sits, how it gets released. So in my opinion, that donating towards the purchase of trees in the conservation land of Brown does the same purpose.
Yep, agreed.
Well, what about the Light and Water Department? They were giving out trees there a year ago.
They have grants for that.
Yep. Okay.
So I agree. It's a nice gesture. I think we should try and take advantage of it, as long as it's not being done, you know, instead of some type of as mitigation, which we know it's not.
Yeah, no, I think it's an above and beyond.
So I think we should figure out how we could do this. And
so now that you brought that forth, let's just try and see if there's any other avenues that we could help facilitate making that happen a little faster and easier. Larry, thank you.
Sure, and if it's using a conservation organization as a surrogate, we can, you know, sometimes I've never met a conservation organization that will not accept a donation. So, you know, working through the town, that would be something we could explore as well.
We do have the Littleton Conservation Trust, so that's a great idea. That's a great way of moving funds into a town without having the town have to manage them.
And I can also discuss with Corey from Littleton Water Department about any possibility along those lines, because water quality and groundwater is more of an issue with 153. May or may not seem appropriate. I don't know.
Well, it's a big project. We're asking you to make a big decision. We think we've done a good design, but we're willing to go above and beyond, I think is what somebody said earlier. So whatever we can do, we'll do.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Well, it's not my money, it's Brian's.
Thank you in advance, Brian.
No, of course, and especially when we heard 151 wasn't going to be used, like Amy, I think you saw our reaction. We got back to you right off the bat. So it's the, hey, we said it in the beginning, and we'll honor that, whether it's written or not. It's just the right thing to do, and we want to see it through. So, just let us know and how we can help.
So this is getting continued to November 3rd. Is that what I'm hearing? Second?
Second.
You just can't wait to vote. That's
I know, right? So, okay. Thank you for your discussion.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Amy, anything else on discussions that we need to?
I think you managed to cover it all.
Oh, and it's only 10:26.
Hey, I got one thing. Are we wrapping up? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so just one quick, this is very quick, and it's just a comment. It not going to require that where the water department is taking down that water testing lab, and they were going to, I think they were going to revegetate it or something. Is it possible that I'm not sure even where that creek goes down there that abuts it, but is there a possibility we could put some type of canoe kayak launch in there? Because there's existing parking. It would be actually a very nice place, but I'm not sure if people could paddle anywhere. If they,
I don't think it really goes anywhere.
Nowhere.
I don't know.
No, it does. If you want to kayak under the railroad bridge, which is really tight, you can actually get like through like Mill Pond. Oh, you know what? Never mind. I'm thinking about the wrong area. I know someone who had to do recon like through that whole Mill Pond area. But yeah, I'm sorry.
You couldn't go up. You couldn't go north. And to the south, it goes down towards Parley, and I'm not sure you can get under.
I don't even know you can get under King Street to go south.
You can't get under Mill Road, so
yeah, I don't think you can get
a really short paddle. And there's a beaver dam right there that they keep going.
Yeah, the beaver dam. If you're there, go in downstream of the beaver dam. And
good idea, Carl, but you're going to need an excavator to make it happen.
That's why I asked the question, because I didn't know, but I thought it was the perfect location because it was a waterfront in a parking lot.
Right.
Honestly, I just thought of something
people
else.
With waders would be better.
Our drinking water comes out of wells directly adjacent to that area that are only like 25 feet deep. So that surface water is something I don't think we'd want a lot of traffic in.
Well, but that's a good question, though, for a follow-up, Carl. So, Julie, do we need to put boulders so that people aren't parking there and dumping things there? Or
it's a zone 1. It needs to be, by the regulations that the town's on the hook to protect it for sure.
Some things
we should look into it. I think the water department should look into it too. Now that it's
well, it's Carl's special place, though. Carl can do that.
No, it's not. No, it is not my special place.
You brought it up.
We'll have a little parking spot for you, Carl.
Do you folks realize that the water from the Hager property comes around through there, through by the Upton House, and dumps into Beaver Brook at that point behind that building?
The antique store and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, is the Upton House still open?
Yeah, it is. It's an antique shop.
I know, but no one's ever there.
Well, no one's ever there anyway.
People are there less now.
A while ago. Okay. Does it kind of sound like I'm looking for a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
I move at 10:30 this evening that we adjourn the meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right.
Guess you get a roll call.
Carl Melberg, aye. Sarah Seward.
Sarah Seward, aye.
James Pickard.
Aye.
Julie Rupp,
Julie Rupp, aye.
Kyle Maxfield.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Unanimous.